You think you can just push people around because you're bigger. Vera Knight's voice cut through the autumn air like a blade, her small frame standing defiantly against Phoenix Dean's towering 6'2" presence outside Sunset Hills High. The star quarterback laughed, completely unaware that the quiet transfer student he'd been tormenting for weeks was about to shatter every assumption he'd ever made about power and weakness. What Phoenix didn't know was that behind Vera's gentle demeanor lay the disciplined mind of a former elite gymnast turned combat sports prodigy, and his relentless bullying had just crossed a line that would cost him everything he thought he owned in this small Ohio town. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crisp October morning had started like any other at Sunset Hills High School, with golden leaves drifting across the cracked sidewalks and students shuffling through the main entrance, clutching coffee cups and backpacks. Vera Knight walked among them, her dark brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing faded jeans and a navy blue hoodie that seemed 2 sizes too large for her petite frame. At 16, she stood barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, and her quiet demeanor had made her nearly invisible during her first month at the school. "There goes the ghost girl," Ruby Lane whispered to her circle of friends as Vera passed their usual spot near the trophy case. Ruby's perfectly styled blonde hair caught the morning light streaming through the tall windows, and her designer clothes marked her as someone who expected attention and usually got it. I swear she hasn't said more than 10 words since she got here. Ruby's boyfriend, Phoenix Dean, leaned against the wall with the casual confidence that came from being Sunset Hills High's star quarterback and the son of the town's most successful construction contractor. His broad shoulders filled out his Letterman jacket, and his sandy brown hair was styled with the kind of effortless perfection that actually took considerable effort. "Maybe she's mute," he said with a smirk, loud enough for Vera to hear as she walked past. Vera's steps didn't falter, but her shoulders tensed slightly. She had heard variations of this conversation every day since arriving in Sunset Hills 3 weeks ago, when her mother, Dr. Caroline Knight, had taken over the struggling veterinary practice on the outskirts of town. The move had been necessary after her father's death in a military training accident 2 years earlier, but that didn't make it any easier. "Leave her alone, Phoenix," said a quiet voice from behind a stack of textbooks. Luna Pierce, a sophomore, with gentle brown eyes and curly auburn hair, rarely spoke up in groups, but something about the casual cruelty bothered her. Her father, Carlos, worked at the auto repair shop and had taught her that people deserved respect, regardless of their circumstances. "Oh, look who's defending the mystery girl," Tucker West chimed in, his thin frame practically vibrating with nervous energy. As Phoenix's best friend and constant sidekick, Tucker had learned that agreeing with the quarterback was the safest path through high school social dynamics. Maybe they can be weird together. Vera continued down the hallway, her soft-soled sneakers making barely a whisper against the polished linoleum. She had learned long ago that responding to taunts only encouraged them, and she had more important things to focus on than the social hierarchy of another new school. Her morning routine was carefully planned. Arrive early, avoid crowds, get to class without incident. The first period bell rang, and students began dispersing toward their classrooms. Vera slipped into her AP history class and took her usual seat in the back corner where she could observe without being observed. Mrs. Virginia Park, a silver-haired teacher with kind eyes and 30 years of experience, noticed everything but chose her battles carefully. "Good morning, class," Mrs. Park said as she arranged her materials at the front of the room. "Today, we're continuing our unit on military history and its impact on American communities. Who can tell me about the role of military families in small-town development?" Several hands shot up, but Vera remained still, even though she probably knew more about military life than anyone else in the room. Her father, Colonel James Knight, had been a decorated Army Ranger before his death, and military protocol had been woven into the fabric of her childhood. She understood honor, duty, and sacrifice in ways that most teenagers couldn't comprehend. "Mr. Dean," Mrs. Park called on Phoenix, who had raised his hand with characteristic confidence. "Military families bring stability and patriotism to communities," Phoenix recited, clearly repeating something he had heard rather than genuinely understood. "They support local businesses and teach values." "That's a start," Mrs. Park acknowledged diplomatically. "Can anyone elaborate on the challenges military families face?" This time, Vera's hand moved involuntarily, a slight twitch that caught Mrs. Park's attention. "Miss Knight, would you like to share your thoughts?" Every head in the classroom turned toward Vera, and she felt the familiar flush of unwanted attention. "They move frequently," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "Children have to adapt to new schools, new communities. Sometimes they lose parents to training accidents or deployments." The room fell silent. There was something in Vera's tone that suggested personal experience rather than textbook knowledge, and Mrs. Park's expression softened with understanding. "Thank you for that perspective," Mrs. Park said gently. "The sacrifices made by military families often go unrecognized in civilian communities." Phoenix turned in his seat to look at Vera more closely, his earlier dismissive attitude replaced by curiosity. For the first time, he wondered if there might be more to the quiet girl than he had assumed. But the moment passed quickly, and by the time class ended, he had returned to his usual preoccupations with football practice and weekend plans. The rest of the morning followed a predictable pattern. Vera moved from class to class like a shadow, completing assignments with quiet competence, but never volunteering information or engaging in social interactions. During lunch, she sat alone at a corner table in the cafeteria, methodically eating a sandwich her mother had packed while reading a worn paperback novel. Luna Pierce watched from across the room, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the isolation that seemed to surround the new girl. Finally, gathering her courage, she approached Vera's table with her own lunch tray. "Mind if I sit here?" Luna asked, her voice gentle but determined. Vera looked up from her book, surprise flickering across her features. "It's a free country," she said after a moment, then immediately winced at how defensive she sounded. Luna settled into the opposite chair, noting the title of Vera's book. "Marcus Aurelius? That's some heavy reading for lunch." "Philosophy helps me think," Vera replied, closing the book but keeping her finger between the pages to mark her place. "My dad got me started on the Stoics when I was 12. "Your dad sounds smart," Luna said, unwrapping her own sandwich. "He was," Vera said quietly, and Luna caught the past tense. Before Luna could respond, a shadow fell across their table. Phoenix Dean stood behind Luna's chair, flanked by Tucker West and two other football players. His expression was unreadable, but there was something calculating in his eyes. "Well, well," Phoenix said, his voice carrying easily across the surrounding tables. "Looks like the ghost girl found her voice after all. Too bad she wastes it on dead Roman guys instead of living people." "Leave us alone, Phoenix," Luna said more firmly than she felt. "I'm not talking to you," Phoenix replied without taking his eyes off Vera. "I'm curious about our mysterious transfer student. Where'd you come from, ghost girl? What's your story?" Vera set down her sandwich and looked up at Phoenix with steady grey eyes. "I don't have a story that would interest you." "Try me," Phoenix challenged, leaning forward slightly. "Small towns get boring. New people are entertainment." "I'm not entertainment," Vera said, her voice remaining calm despite the tension building in her shoulders. Tucker West laughed nervously. "Come on, Phoenix. Let's go. Coach wants us in the weight room early today." But Phoenix seemed genuinely intrigued now, perhaps for the first time encountering someone who didn't immediately respond to his social dominance. "You know what I think?" he said, straightening to his full height. "I think you're hiding something. Nobody moves to Sunset Hills without a reason, and nobody stays this quiet unless they've got secrets." Vera stood slowly, gathering her things with deliberate precision. She was nearly a foot shorter than Phoenix, but something in her posture commanded attention. "Everyone has secrets," she said simply. "The smart ones know when to keep them." She walked away without another word, leaving Phoenix staring after her with a mixture of frustration and fascination. Luna hurried to catch up, her heart racing from the unexpected confrontation. "That was brave," Luna said, as they reached the hallway. "That was stupid," Vera corrected. "I just made myself a target." "Phoenix isn't really bad," Luna said, though she sounded like she was trying to convince herself. "He's just used to getting his way." Vera paused at her locker, spinning the combination with practiced efficiency. "There's a difference between someone who gets their way and someone who takes it," she said. "I've seen both types." Luna wanted to ask what she meant, but the warning bell for fifth period interrupted her thoughts. As they parted ways for their respective classes, neither girl noticed Ruby Lane watching from the end of the hallway. Her blue eyes narrowed with an emotion that wasn't quite jealousy, but wasn't far from it. The afternoon brought new challenges. In PE class, Vera changed quickly in the corner of the locker room, avoiding eye contact with the other girls who chatted easily about weekend plans and social media drama. She had learned to be invisible in these situations, but invisibility was becoming harder to maintain. Coach Michelle Woods, a compact woman in her 40s with graying brown hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to discipline, watched the students with sharp eyes. She had been a competitive gymnast in college before a career-ending injury led her to coaching, and she recognized certain qualities in how people moved and carried themselves. "Night," Coach Woods called as the class lined up for fitness testing. "You're new? Any sports background?" "Some gymnastics," Vera said carefully, which was technically true, if dramatically understated. "Good. You'll partner with Rivera for the flexibility assessment." Jade Rivera, the student council president, was everything Vera was not: outgoing, confident, and effortlessly popular. But there was an intelligence in her dark eyes that suggested depth beneath the social polish. "I've seen you around," Jade said, as they found space on the gymnasium mats. "You're in my AP history class. Mrs. Park loves students who actually read the assignments." "I like history," Vera replied, settling into a stretching position with fluid grace that made Jade pause. "Whoa," Jade said, watching Vera fold forward into a perfect pike position. "Some gymnastics, you move like you've been training since you could walk." Vera straightened quickly, realizing she had revealed more than intended. "I trained for a few years. It's been a while." But Jade's curious expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by the casual explanation. Before she could ask follow-up questions, a commotion erupted near the gymnasium entrance. Phoenix Dean burst through the doors, his face flushed with anger and his jersey torn at the shoulder. Behind him came Tucker West and two other boys, all looking like they had been in some kind of altercation. "Dean," Coach Woods barked, "what's the meaning of this interruption?" "Sorry, Coach," Phoenix said, trying to regain his composure. "We had a situation with some guys from Westfield High. They were hassling Luna Pierce outside after lunch." All eyes turned toward Luna, who stood near the bleachers looking shaken and embarrassed. Her usually neat appearance was disheveled, and there were grass stains on her knees. "What happened?" Coach Woods demanded, her protective instincts flaring. "Three older guys started following me home," Luna said quietly. "They were saying things, trying to get me to go with them. Phoenix and the others showed up and made them leave." "Did you contact the authorities?" Coach Woods asked. "The guys ran off when we got there," Tucker explained. "But they said they'd be back tomorrow. Something about Luna being too good for this hick town." Vera felt something cold settle in her stomach. She recognized the pattern: escalating harassment, testing boundaries, building towards something worse. She had seen it before in other schools, other situations. "Luna," she said quietly, moving closer to her new friend. "Were they wearing Westfield letter jackets?" Luna nodded, surprised that Vera was taking an active interest. "That's the Westfield crew that's been causing problems around town," Jade said grimly. "They think they own every girl within a 20-mile radius." Coach Woods was already reaching for her phone. "I'm calling Principal Stone and the school resource officer. This kind of harassment won't be tolerated." But Vera was thinking beyond official channels. She had learned from her father that sometimes institutions move too slowly to prevent real harm, and sometimes people had to take responsibility for protecting each other. The final bell rang, releasing students into the crisp afternoon air. As Vera gathered her belongings from her locker, she noticed Luna waiting nervously by the front entrance, clearly afraid to walk home alone. "Want company?" Vera asked, approaching with her backpack slung over one shoulder. "You don't have to," Luna said, but relief was evident in her voice. "I know," Vera replied simply. They walked together down Maple Street, past neat houses with autumn decorations and carefully maintained lawns. Sunset Hills was the kind of town where people knew. Their neighbors and children rode bikes without supervision, but even safe places had shadows. "You didn't have to stand up for me in the cafeteria," Luna said, as they reached the corner where their paths diverged. "Yes, I did," Vera said without hesitation. "Why?" Vera paused, considering her answer carefully. "Because someone has to. Because silence is just another form of consent." Luna studied her new friend's face, seeing something there that hadn't been visible before. "You're not really just a quiet transfer student, are you?" "I'm exactly what I appear to be," Vera said, "but appearances can be deceiving." As they parted ways, neither girl noticed the blue pickup truck that had been following them at a distance, or the three figures inside who were already planning their next move. Some lessons, Vera reflected, as she walked the final 2 blocks to the modest house she shared with her mother, couldn't be taught in classrooms. The evening would bring new challenges, and tomorrow would test everything that Sunset Hills High thought it knew about power, courage, and the quiet girl who had been hiding in plain sight. But for now, Vera Knight walked home through the golden October light, carrying secrets that would soon reshape the social order of an entire community. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The Knight Veterinary Clinic sat on the edge of town where suburban lawns gave way to farmland. A converted barn that still carried the faint scent of hay beneath the antiseptic smell of medical equipment. Dr. Caroline Knight moved through the examination room with the efficient grace of someone who had spent 15 years treating everything, from household pets to livestock. Her auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, and her scrubs bearing the inevitable stains of a busy day. "How's the adjustment going, sweetheart?" she asked, as Vera helped clean surgical instruments in the back room, their evening routine providing a quiet space for conversation. "School's fine," Vera replied, scrubbing a set of forceps with more attention than necessary. Caroline paused in her inventory of medication supplies, recognizing the careful neutrality in her daughter's voice. 2 years of single parenthood had taught her to read the subtle signs that indicated Vera was processing something difficult. "Just fine?" Caroline pressed gently. "No interesting classes? New friends?" "I met a girl named Luna. She's nice." Vera set the clean instruments in the sterilization tray. "Mom, what do you do when you see someone being threatened and the authorities can't respond fast enough?" The question hung in the air between them, carrying weight that Caroline recognized. From her late husband's military career, Colonel James Knight had faced similar dilemmas during his service. moments when official protocols conflicted with immediate moral imperatives. "That's a complicated question," Caroline said slowly. "Your father used to say that protecting people was everyone's responsibility, but the methods mattered as much as the intentions. What if someone you care about is in danger and you have the skills to help them?" Caroline turned to face her daughter fully, noting the tension in Vera's shoulders and the way her hands remained perfectly still. "Vera, is someone threatening you? Not me directly." Vera began organizing medical supplies with military precision, a habit she had inherited from her father. "But there's a situation developing, and I'm trying to decide how much responsibility I should take." "Your father believed in graduated response," Caroline said carefully. "Assess the threat level, exhaust peaceful solutions first, but never hesitate to act decisively when innocent people are at risk." Vera nodded, filing the advice away for future consideration. They worked in comfortable silence for another hour, but Caroline noticed her daughter checking her phone repeatedly, as if expecting bad news. Meanwhile, across town in the upscale Westfield Hills development, 3 young men sat in a basement recreation room planning their next move. Dylan Crawford, 19 and built like a linebacker, sprawled across a leather recliner while his companions, Brett Mason and Kyle Torres, lounged on a sectional sofa. Empty beer bottles and fast food containers littered the expensive furniture, testament to an evening of escalating bravado. "The little brunette thinks she's too good for us," Dylan said, scrolling through social media photos he had taken of Luna without her knowledge. "Following her around after school, acting all scared. We need to show her what real men look like." "Maybe we should back off," Kyle suggested nervously. "That quarterback and his friends looked pretty serious today." "High school kids," Brett scoffed, his thin face twisted with contempt. "We're college material. They wouldn't dare actually fight us." Dylan stood and walked to the window overlooking his family's manicured lawn. His father owned 3 car dealerships across the county, and Dylan had grown up believing that money and size gave him permission to take whatever he wanted. "Tomorrow we corner her properly. No interruptions this time." "What if she screams or calls for help?" Kyle asked. "She won't," Dylan said with confidence that came from previous successful intimidations. "Quiet girls never make scenes. They just take whatever happens and hope it goes away." But Dylan Crawford had never encountered anyone like Vera Knight, and his assumptions about quiet girls were about to prove catastrophically wrong. Thursday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, Indian summer stretching into late October with golden light and clear skies. Vera dressed with particular care, choosing sturdy jeans and boots that would allow for unrestricted movement, unconsciously applying tactical considerations to her wardrobe selection. At school, Luna appeared increasingly anxious, jumping at sudden sounds and constantly checking over her shoulder. During second period chemistry, she spilled a beaker of harmless solution when a textbook dropped behind her, earning concerned looks from classmates and their teacher, Mr. Davidson. "Miss Pierce," Mr. Davidson said quietly as students cleaned up the mess, "perhaps you should visit the nurse if you're not feeling well." "I'm fine," Luna insisted, but her hands trembled as she reached for paper towels. Vera watched from her lab station, noting the signs of escalating stress that she recognized from her father's descriptions of pre-deployment anxiety. Someone was deliberately cultivating fear, and fear could paralyze or motivate depending on how it was channeled. During lunch, Principal Eric Stone appeared in the cafeteria with Officer Tom Bradley, the school resource officer. Stone was a tall, thin man in his 50s who genuinely cared about his students, but sometimes struggled with situations that required decisive action rather than administrative procedure. "Miss Pierce," Principal Stone called, approaching Luna's table where she sat with Vera and Jade Rivera. Could we speak with you privately about yesterday's incident? Luna's face went pale, but she nodded and followed them to a quieter corner of the cafeteria. Vera strained to listen while pretending to focus on her sandwich. We've contacted the Westfield Police Department, Officer Bradley explained in his measured, professional tone. They'll increase patrols in the area where the harassment occurred. Increased patrols, Jade muttered under her breath. That's their solution? The individuals involved haven't technically committed any crimes, Principal Stone said apologetically. Verbal harassment is difficult to prosecute without clear threats or physical contact. So we wait until something worse happens, Luna asked, her voice barely audible. We follow proper channels, Officer Bradley replied firmly. No vigilante justice. If you see these individuals again, you contact authorities immediately. Vera felt her jaw clench. She understood the limitations of institutional response, but she also understood that predators relied on those limitations to operate with impunity. Her father had taught her that sometimes the gap between official protection and actual protection had to be filled by individuals willing to take personal responsibility. After lunch, Vera made a decision that would alter the trajectory of everything that followed. Instead of heading to her usual spot in the library during her free period, she walked purposefully toward the athletic wing, where Coach Woods was reviewing gymnastic equipment in a storage room. Night, Coach Woods said, looking up from her inventory clipboard. What can I do for you? I need access to the gymnastics equipment after school, Vera said without preamble. I want to start training again. Coach Woods studied her carefully. Training for what? We don't have a competitive gymnastics team. Personal fitness, Vera replied, which was technically true if incomplete. Your flexibility assessment suggested significant previous experience, Coach Woods observed. What level did you compete at? Vera hesitated, then decided that partial honesty was necessary. Elite level. I was training for nationals when my father died and we had to move. Coach Woods set down her clipboard, giving Vera her full attention. Elite level means years of professional coaching, specialized facilities, complete dedication to the sport. Yes. And you gave it up? My mother couldn't afford to continue the program after my father's death, Vera said simply. Military families don't always have the financial resources that elite athletics require. Coach Woods was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of what she was hearing. Elite gymnasts didn't simply lose their abilities when they stopped formal training. The muscle memory, the body awareness, the mental discipline, those remained permanently ingrained. The gym is available from 4 to 6 every weekday, Coach Woods said finally. But I want to be clear about something, Knight. Whatever drove you away from competition, using athletic facilities to work through personal issues can be dangerous without proper supervision. I understand the risks, Vera replied. Do you? Coach Woods challenged. Because elite athletes sometimes develop unhealthy relationships with physical challenge and pain management. Vera met her gaze steadily. My father taught me that strength should be used to protect others, not to prove anything to yourself. Something in her tone convinced Coach Woods that Vera Knight understood exactly what she was saying and why she was saying it. The equipment is yours, but I'll be checking on you periodically. The final bell released students into the afternoon sunshine, and Vera noticed Luna leaving through the main entrance with obvious reluctance. She caught up quickly, falling into step beside her new friend. Want company again? Vera offered. You don't have to keep protecting me, Luna said, but her relief was evident. I'm not protecting you, Vera replied calmly. I'm walking in the same direction. They had covered 3 blocks when Vera spotted the blue pickup truck she had noticed the previous day, this time parked openly at the intersection ahead. 3 young men leaned against it with studied casualness that immediately triggered her. Threat assessment protocols. Luna, Vera said quietly, when I tell you to, I want you to run to Mrs. Henderson's house on the corner and call 911. What? Luna looked confused, then followed Vera's gaze and saw the truck. Her step faltered. Oh God, they're waiting for us. Keep walking normally, Vera instructed, her voice carrying the calm authority she had learned from watching her father brief soldiers before dangerous missions. Don't show fear. Dylan Crawford pushed off from the truck as they approached, his companions flanking him in a formation that blocked the sidewalk. At 6'4" and 250 pounds, he was accustomed to using his physical presence to intimidate, and Luna's obvious terror confirmed his expectations. Well, if it isn't our little princess, Dylan said with a smile that never reached. His eyes... We've been waiting to continue our conversation from yesterday. There's nothing to talk about, Luna said, trying to keep her voice steady. I think there is, Brett Mason interjected, moving to cut off their retreat path. You seem to think you're too good for friendly conversation. The conversation's over, Vera said clearly, speaking for the first time. Dylan's attention shifted to her with predatory interest. Who's this? Your bodyguard? Kyle Torres laughed, a nervous sound that betrayed his uncertainty about the situation. She's about half your size, Dylan. What's she gonna do? Vera assessed their positioning with the tactical awareness her father had drilled into her during countless self-defense sessions. Dylan was the primary threat, but also the most overconfident. Brett was smaller, but potentially faster. Kyle was nervous, which made him unpredictable, but also likely to break first. Under pressure. Luna, go to Mrs. Henderson's house now, Vera said without taking her eyes off Dylan. I'm not leaving you alone with them, Luna protested. Go, Vera repeated, her voice carrying unmistakable command authority. Luna hesitated for another second, then ran. Dylan started to follow her, but Vera stepped directly into his path. Your problem is with me now, she said simply. Dylan stopped and looked down at her with genuine amusement. Little girl, you have no idea what kind of problem you just bought yourself. I think I do, Vera replied calmly. What happened next would be discussed and debated throughout Sunset Hills for months afterward. Dylan Crawford reached out to grab Vera's arm, intending to demonstrate his physical dominance through casual violence. Instead, Vera moved with liquid precision, redirecting his momentum and using his own weight against him in a hip throw that sent him crashing to the asphalt. With stunning force, Brett Mason lunged forward to help his friend, but Vera was already moving. Years of elite gymnastics training had given her body awareness and flexibility that most people couldn't comprehend, while recent combat sports instruction had taught her how to apply those gifts in practical situations. Brett found himself on the ground beside Dylan before he fully understood what had happened. Kyle Torres stood frozen, staring at his two companions writhing on the pavement and at the small girl who had put them there without apparent effort. Call 911, Vera told him calmly. Your friends need medical attention. How did you... Kyle stammered. Physics, Vera replied. Leverage, momentum, and knowing when someone is about to attack. Dylan Crawford struggled to sit up, his right wrist clearly injured and his pride more damaged than his body. You crazy bitch, you broke my arm. It's sprained, not broken, Vera corrected, though you should have it examined by a medical professional. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer as Mrs. Henderson's 911 call brought official response to the situation. Officer Bradley arrived first, followed quickly by Detective Angela Fox and an ambulance crew. What happened here? Officer, Bradley demanded, surveying the scene of two college-age men on the ground and one teenage girl standing calmly nearby. They were blocking the sidewalk and threatening my friend, Vera explained matter-of-factly. When one of them attempted to grab me, I defended myself. Dylan Crawford was helped to his feet by the paramedics, his face flushed with humiliation and rage. "She attacked us. 3 against 1. We were just talking to them." "That's not what I saw," came a clear voice from across the street. Mrs. Helen Henderson, a retired school principal in her 70s, approached with the confidence of someone accustomed to dealing with young people and their various crises. "I was watching from my window when these boys blocked the girl's path. The big one grabbed at the smaller girl first." Detective Fox took careful notes while the paramedics examined Dylan's wrist and Brett's bruised ribs. Both young men would recover fully, but their egos had sustained more serious damage. "Miss Knight," Detective Fox said, approaching Vera with professional curiosity, "where did you learn to defend yourself like that?" "My father taught me basic self-defense," Vera replied, which was true if dramatically understated. "Your father must have been a very thorough instructor." "He was Army Rangers," Vera said simply, and Detective Fox nodded with understanding. "Rangers tend to be thorough about protecting their families," Detective Fox acknowledged. The incident report would ultimately support Vera's account of self-defense, but the real consequences were just beginning to unfold. By evening, news of the confrontation had spread throughout both schools, carried by students who had witnessed the aftermath, and embellished through multiple retellings. At Sunset Hills High, Vera Knight was no longer the invisible transfer student. She had become something far more complex, a mystery with demonstrated capabilities that nobody had anticipated. Phoenix Dean, hearing the story during evening football practice, found himself reconsidering every assumption he had made about the quiet girl who read philosophy during lunch. "You sure it was the same girl?" Tucker West asked incredulously. "The one who barely talks in class?" Henderson confirmed it, Phoenix replied, still processing the information. 3 college guys, and she dropped 2 of them before the cops arrived. Coach Thompson, overhearing the conversation, looked up from his play charts. "Sounds like someone's been spreading tall tales." Officer Bradley confirmed it too, Phoenix Sue said it was the most professional self-defense he'd ever seen from a civilian. "Professional," Coach Thompson repeated thoughtfully. "That's an interesting word choice." At home that evening, Vera sat across from her mother at their small kitchen table, recounting the day's events over dinner. Caroline listened without interruption, her medical training helping her remain calm while her parental instincts processed the implications of her daughter's actions. "Are you hurt?" Caroline asked when Vera finished her account. "No, neither are they, really. Bruised pride more than anything else." "And you feel comfortable with how you handled the situation?" Vera considered the question carefully. "I used minimum necessary force to neutralize a threat to Luna and myself. Dad would have approved of the tactical execution." Caroline nodded slowly. "He would have. But he also would have warned you about the consequences of revealing your capabilities." "No," Vera said quietly. "Everything changes now." "Yes, it does," Caroline agreed. "The question is whether you're ready for that change." Vera looked out the kitchen window toward the lights of Sunset Hills, thinking about Luna's grateful text message, about Dylan Crawford's humiliated rage, about the way Phoenix Dean had looked at her in the hallway after the news spread. "I spent 2 years trying to be invisible," she said finally, "but invisible people can't protect anyone else." Caroline reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Your father would be proud of you for standing up for your friend. Just remember that once people know what you're capable of, they'll have expectations and assumptions that might not match who you really are. Then I'll have to show them who I really am," Vera replied with quiet determination. Outside, autumn wind rustled through the oak trees that lined their quiet street, carrying the promise of changes that neither mother nor daughter could fully anticipate. Tomorrow, would bring new challenges as word spread throughout the community, and Vera Knight would discover that heroic actions, even justified ones, carried consequences that extended far beyond the immediate moment of decision. Friday morning transformed Sunset Hills High into a buzzing hive of speculation and whispered conversations. Students clustered in small groups throughout the hallways, their voices carrying fragments of yesterday's incident that had already morphed into legend. Through repeated tellings, Vera Knight walked through this transformed landscape, aware that every eye followed her movement, every conversation paused as she passed. "Is that really her?" Freshman Jessica Kim whispered to her friend near the water fountain. "Has to be. Look, how she moves, like she's ready for anything," came the reply. Vera had anticipated the attention, but experiencing it proved more challenging than preparation. She had spent years perfecting the art of invisibility, and suddenly finding herself the center of fascinated scrutiny felt like wearing a spotlight in a dark room. Ruby Lane intercepted her path near the main staircase, flanked by her usual entourage of carefully curated friends. Ruby's perfectly applied makeup couldn't quite disguise the calculating expression in her blue eyes as she studied Vera with new interest. "Well, well," Ruby said, her voice carrying clearly across the crowded hallway. "Looks like our mystery girl has some hidden talents." "It wasn't anything special," Vera replied evenly, attempting to sidestep the confrontation. "3 college guys disagree with you," Samantha Wells chimed in, Ruby's closest friend and most devoted follower. "Word is, you put them both on the ground, without breaking a sweat." Ruby stepped closer, invading Vera's personal space with deliberate intent. "Here's what I find interesting. You've been pretending to be this shy little nobody for weeks, but suddenly you're some kind of karate expert. Makes a girl wonder what else you've been lying about." "I haven't lied about anything," Vera said calmly. "No?" Ruby's smile was sharp as broken glass. "So you just forgot to mention that you could probably kick any guy in this school's ass?" The surrounding students had stopped pretending to mind their own business, forming a loose circle around the developing confrontation. Vera recognized the social dynamics at play. Ruby felt threatened by the shift in attention and was attempting to reassert her dominance through public confrontation. "I don't fight people for entertainment," Vera said simply. "How noble," Ruby sneered. "But here's the thing about secrets, mystery girl. Once people know you have them, they start wondering what else you're hiding." Before Vera could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Ruby, don't you have better things to do than harass people in the hallway?" Phoenix Dean emerged from the crowd, his presence immediately shifting the social calculus of the situation. At 6'2", with the confident bearing that came from athletic success and social status, Phoenix commanded attention effortlessly. Ruby's expression flickered between surprise and irritation. "We were just getting acquainted with our local hero. Conversation's over," Phoenix said firmly, stepping between Ruby and Vera with casual authority. "Since when do you care about protecting the weird girl?" Ruby challenged, but her voice lacked its earlier venom. "Since yesterday," Phoenix replied without elaboration. Ruby stared at him for several seconds, processing the implications of his intervention. Finally, she turned on her heel and stalked away, her followers trailing behind like confused ducklings. The crowd began to disperse as the warning bell echoed through the hallways, but Phoenix remained beside Vera, his expression thoughtful. "You didn't need my help," he observed. "No," Vera agreed, "but thank you anyway." "Walk with me to first period," Phoenix said, and it wasn't quite a request. They moved through the hallway together, and Vera noted how other students' reactions changed when she appeared alongside the school's star quarterback. Conversations shifted from speculative whispers to respectful nods, and she realized that Phoenix's social status was extending temporary protection over her. "So," Phoenix said as they climbed the stairs toward the academic wing, Army Rangers. Huh? Vera glanced at him sharply. Where did you hear that? Small town, word travels fast. Phoenix paused at the top of the stairs. My grandfather was Marines, Korea and Vietnam. He used to tell stories about working with Rangers on special operations. Did he? Vera's tone remained neutral, but Phoenix caught the slight warming in her expression. Said they were the toughest, most professional soldiers he ever met. Also said their families learned to take care of themselves because Rangers couldn't always be there to protect them. They reached the door to Vera's first period classroom, and Phoenix stopped walking. Other students flowed around them, curious about the unlikely pairing, but respectful enough of Phoenix's social position to avoid obvious eavesdropping. The thing is, Phoenix continued, I've been thinking about yesterday, about how you handled those guys. What about it? Professional, Phoenix said, echoing Detective Fox's assessment, like you'd done it before. Vera studied his face, looking for signs of mockery or challenge, but found only genuine curiosity. What's your point? My point is that someone taught you more than basic self-defense. Someone taught you how to assess threats, how to position yourself tactically, how to use minimum force for maximum effect. Phoenix leaned against the wall, his voice dropping to a more private register. That's not something you learn in a weekend seminar. Before Vera could respond, Mrs. Park appeared in the doorway of her classroom. Mr. Dean, Miss Knight, the bell rang 30 seconds ago. Are you planning to join us for today's discussion of military leadership principles? Yes, ma'am, Phoenix replied, but his eyes remained on Vera's face. We were just discussing that exact topic. During first period, Mrs. Park led a discussion about leadership under pressure, using historical examples from various military campaigns. Phoenix found himself watching Vera's reactions, noting how she responded to specific tactical scenarios, with the kind of understanding that came from more than textbook knowledge. Miss Knight, Mrs. Park called, what would you identify as the key factor in successful leadership during crisis situations? Vera looked up from her notes, aware that Phoenix and several other students were paying close attention to her answer. Clarity of purpose combined with adaptability of method, she said after a moment. A leader needs to understand the mission objectives, but remain flexible about how to achieve them. Elaborate, Mrs. Park encouraged. Static plans fail when circumstances change, which they always do in crisis situations. But if you understand the core mission and maintain clear communication with your team, you can adapt tactics while preserving strategic goals. Mrs. Park nodded approvingly. That's a sophisticated analysis. Are you speaking from personal experience or theoretical study? Both, Vera replied carefully. Phoenix exchanged glances with Tucker West, both recognizing that Vera's answer reflected deeper knowledge than most 17-year-old civilians possessed. After class, Phoenix caught up with Vera in the hallway. You want to grab lunch together? He asked, surprising both himself and Vera with the spontaneous invitation. Why? Vera asked directly. Phoenix paused, considering his motivations. Because I think I misjudged you, and I'd like to understand who you really are. Most people prefer their assumptions to the truth, Vera observed. I'm not most people, Phoenix replied with quiet confidence. Vera studied his face for several seconds, then nodded. All right. The cafeteria buzzed with new energy when Phoenix Dean entered with Vera Knight, their unexpected partnership sending ripples of speculation throughout the social ecosystem. They found seats at a table near the windows, close enough to other groups for casual conversation, but far enough away to maintain privacy. Luna Pierce approached tentatively, carrying her lunch tray and looking uncertain about whether she was welcome. Sit, Vera said simply, and Luna gratefully took the chair beside her. How are you feeling? Phoenix asked Luna with genuine concern. Yesterday had to be scary. It was, Luna admitted, but Vera made sure I was safe. She did more than that. Phoenix said, his respect evident. She made sure those guys won't bother anyone else either. Jade Rivera joined them, her student council responsibilities having kept her informed about the official response to yesterday's incident. Detective Fox said the Westfield guys are facing harassment charges. Apparently, they have a history of bothering girls from other schools. Good, Phoenix said firmly. Actions have consequences. Speaking of consequences, Jade continued, there's been some interesting discussion among the school board about updating our security protocols. Vera looked up from her sandwich. What kind of updates? Self-defense instruction as part of PE curriculum, Jade explained. Principal Stone thinks yesterday's incident highlighted gaps in our preparation for real-world situations. Self-defense classes, Luna asked with interest. Would you help teach them, Vera? I'm not qualified to instruct others, Vera replied automatically. Phoenix raised an eyebrow. Someone who can drop 2 grown men without getting a scratch on herself isn't qualified to teach self-defense. There's a difference between knowing how to defend yourself and knowing how to teach others, Vera said carefully. Teaching requires understanding different learning styles, safety protocols, legal limitations. But you could learn those things, Jade pressed. Coach Woods has instructor certifications. She could mentor you through the process. Vera found herself considering the possibility despite her initial reluctance. Her father had always emphasized that skills carried responsibility, and perhaps teaching others was simply an extension of that principle. I'll think about it, she said finally. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Tucker West, who approached their table with obvious nervousness. Phoenix's best friend had spent the morning wrestling with curiosity and social anxiety, finally deciding that his need to understand trumped his fear of looking foolish. Mind if I sit? Tucker asked, addressing the question primarily to Phoenix, but including the others with quick glances. Sure, Phoenix replied. Making room at the table, Tucker settled into his chair and looked directly at Vera. I heard about what happened yesterday, and I wanted to say thank you. For what? Vera asked. For making sure those guys know they can't just intimidate people around here, Tucker explained. I've been on the receiving end of that kind of behavior, and it's not fun. Phoenix looked at his friend with surprise. What do you mean? Tucker's face flushed slightly. Last year, when you were out with that shoulder injury, some older guys from Westfield cornered me after a basketball game, said some pretty nasty things, pushed me around a little, made me feel like a complete coward because I didn't fight back. Why didn't you tell me? Phoenix asked, his voice carrying a note of hurt. Because what were you going to do? Get yourself suspended. Fighting my battles, Tucker shook his head. But knowing that someone would stand up to guys like that someone cares enough to put themselves at risk for others, it matters. Vera studied Tucker's earnest expression, recognizing the courage it had taken for him to share something that clearly caused him embarrassment. Standing up to bullies isn't about fighting, she said gently. It's about refusing to let fear control your choices. Easy for you to say, Tucker replied with a rueful smile. You can actually back up that philosophy with action. Anyone can learn to defend themselves, Vera said, but more importantly, anyone can learn to defend others through community action, institutional support, legal channels. Phoenix leaned forward, intrigued by her perspective. You really believe that? I have to, Vera replied simply. Otherwise, protection becomes the exclusive privilege of people with physical advantages, and that's not how healthy communities work. Jade nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need in student government. Have you considered running for class representative? Vera almost laughed. I've been here less than a month, and until yesterday, most people didn't. No, I existed. That was yesterday, Phoenix pointed out. Today, you're the girl who stood up to college bullies and won. Tomorrow, you could be the student leader who helps make this school safer for everyone. The conversation continued through the remainder. of lunch period, ranging across topics from school security to community responsibility to the challenges of military families in civilian communities. Vera found herself gradually relaxing, surprised by the intelligence and genuine concern demonstrated by students she had dismissed as typical popular kids. When the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Phoenix walked with Vera toward her locker. The hallways were busy with students rushing to afternoon classes, but Phoenix seemed in no hurry to reach his own destination. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said, as they reached Vera's locker. "You can ask," Vera replied, working her combination. "I might not answer." "Fair enough." Phoenix leaned against the adjacent locker, his expression serious. "How long have you been carrying the weight of protecting other people?" The question caught Vera off guard, and she paused in gathering her afternoon textbooks. "What makes you think I carry that weight?" "The way you assess every room you enter, looking for exits and potential threats. The way you position yourself between Luna and danger without even thinking about it. The way you talk about community responsibility like it's a personal mission." Phoenix's voice was gentle but perceptive. "That's not normal teenage behavior, even for someone with your training." Vera closed her locker and turned to face him fully. "My father died in a training accident 2 years ago. He was preparing for deployment to protect people he'd never met in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. After he died, I realized that protection doesn't stop being necessary just because the protectors are gone. So you decided to carry on his mission." "I decided to honor what he taught me," Vera corrected. "There's a difference," Phoenix nodded slowly. "And what did he teach you?" "That strength without purpose is just violence, but purpose without strength is just wishful thinking." Vera shouldered her backpack. "He taught me that protecting others isn't about being a hero, it's about being responsible." They walked toward the science wing together, their conversation continuing despite the approaching tardy bell. "You know what I think?" Phoenix said as they reached the chemistry classroom. "What?" "I think you've been alone with that responsibility for too long." Phoenix met her eyes directly. "Maybe it's time to let other people help carry the weight." Vera paused in the doorway, considering his words. "Why would you want to help?" "Because yesterday you showed me what real courage looks like," Phoenix replied simply, "and I'd like to learn how to have that kind of courage myself." The tardy bell rang, ending their conversation, but as Vera took her seat in chemistry class, she found herself thinking about Phoenix's offer. For 2 years, she had carried her father's lessons alone, believing that sharing the burden would somehow diminish it. But perhaps isolation wasn't strength. Perhaps real strength meant building communities of protection rather than standing as a solitary guardian. After school, Vera made her way to the gymnasium for her arranged training session with Coach Woods. The athletic wing was mostly empty, with only the sounds of distant basketball practice echoing from the main gym. Coach Woods was waiting in the gymnastics area, having set up basic equipment for assessment and conditioning. "Ready to show me what you're working with?" Coach Woods asked, as Vera changed into training clothes. Vera began with basic stretching, her movements fluid and precise. Within minutes, Coach Woods realized that some gymnastics experience had been a dramatic understatement. Vera's flexibility, strength, and body control were at levels that took years of elite training to achieve. "Stop," Coach Woods said after watching Vera execute a series of movements that belonged in Olympic competition. "We need to talk before you go any further." Vera straightened, sensing the shift in Coach Woods' demeanor. "I've been coaching for 20 years, Coach Woods said carefully. "I know elite-level training when I see it. You weren't just in gymnastics for a few years. You were being groomed for national competition." Vera nodded slowly. "I trained at Philadelphia Elite from age 8 to 14. Coach Martinez thought I had potential for the national team." What happened? My father was killed, and my mother couldn't afford to continue the program. Elite gymnastics requires significant financial investment for coaching, travel, equipment. Vera's voice remained steady, but Coach Woods caught the underlying pain. We moved here so my mother could start over professionally. Coach Woods processed this information, understanding now why Vera moved with such unconscious grace and why her tactical thinking seemed so advanced. Elite athletes developed mental discipline that transferred to other areas of life, including crisis management and threat assessment. What are you hoping to accomplish with training? Coach Woods asked. Maintenance, Vera replied. I want to preserve the conditioning and skills my father helped me develop, and I want to be ready if people need protection again. Protection, Coach Woods repeated thoughtfully. You're not talking about competing anymore. No, competition was my father's dream for me. Protection is mine. Coach Woods nodded slowly, recognizing the distinction. All right. But if you're serious about this, you need to understand that I won't be just a coach. I'll be a mentor, and mentors have responsibilities to their students that go beyond athletic development. What do you mean? I mean that with your abilities comes the responsibility to use them wisely. I've seen talented athletes destroy themselves and others because they confused physical capability with moral authority. Coach Woods gestured toward the equipment around them. This gym can help you maintain your skills, but I need your commitment that you'll continue developing your judgment alongside your abilities. Vera extended her hand formally. You have my word, Coach. As they shook hands, both women understood that they were entering into something more significant than a simple training arrangement. Coach Woods was accepting responsibility for guiding a young person with extraordinary capabilities, while Vera was committing to growth that encompassed more than physical development. The training session that followed was intense but carefully structured, with Coach Woods assessing Vera's current condition while establishing safety protocols for future sessions. By the time they finished, both were confident that Vera could maintain her elite-level conditioning while working toward broader goals of community service and leadership development. As Vera walked home through the gathering dusk, she reflected on the day's unexpected developments. Phoenix Dean's genuine interest in understanding her perspective, Luna's growing confidence, the possibility of teaching self-defense to other students, all represented opportunities to honor her father's memory while building something new for herself. But she also understood that visibility brought vulnerability. Ruby Lane's hostility was only the beginning of the social complications that would arise from her changed status, and the Westfield incident had likely created enemies who wouldn't be satisfied with a single humiliating defeat. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time since arriving in Sunset Hills, Vera Knight felt like she was moving towards something positive rather than simply running from something painful. The question was whether the community would prove ready for the changes her presence would inevitably bring. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor to the Knight Veterinary Clinic. Nathan Lane arrived in a black Mercedes sedan, his expensive suit and carefully groomed appearance contrasting sharply with the rural setting. As one of Sunset Hills' most successful businessmen and Ruby's father, Nathan commanded respect through wealth and political connections that extended throughout the county. Dr. Caroline Knight looked up from her examination of a golden retriever. As Nathan entered the waiting area, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in the small clinic. She recognized him from community functions and school board meetings, though they had never spoken directly. Mr. Lane, Caroline said professionally, securing the dog in its kennel before approaching. What can I do for you? Dr. Knight, I apologize. And for the unannounced visit, Nathan said with practiced charm. I was hoping we could discuss a delicate matter concerning our daughters. Caroline's expression remained neutral, but her posture subtly shifted into a more defensive stance. Military spouses learned to recognize when civilian authority figures arrived with hidden agendas. What kind of matter? Perhaps we could speak privately, Nathan suggested, glancing toward the treatment area where Vera was cleaning equipment. I understand your daughter had an altercation with some college students this week. My daughter defended herself and a friend from harassment, Caroline corrected firmly. There was no altercation. Nathan's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened slightly. Of course, poor choice of words. The thing is, Dr. Knight, my daughter Ruby has mentioned some concerning behavior from Vera at school. What kind of concerning behavior? Aggressive posturing, intimidation of other students, boasting about her fighting abilities. Nathan leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. I'm sure it's just teenage adjustment difficulties, but as responsible parents, we should address these issues before they escalate. Caroline felt her temper rising, but maintained her professional composure. Mr. Lane, are you suggesting that my daughter is threatening other students? I'm suggesting that a young person with obvious combat training might inadvertently create an atmosphere of fear among her classmates, Nathan replied smoothly. Ruby's quite concerned about the safety implications. From the treatment area, Vera could hear the conversation despite Nathan's attempt at discretion. She continued her cleaning routine while listening, recognizing the tactical pattern of someone using indirect pressure to achieve specific objectives. Mr. Lane, Caroline said with ice-cold politeness, my daughter has been nothing but respectful and helpful since arriving in this community. If Ruby has specific complaints about Vera's behavior, I'd be happy to address them directly. Oh, it's nothing that dramatic, Nathan backtracked, sensing Caroline's growing hostility. I'm simply suggesting that perhaps Vera might benefit from some counseling to help her process whatever trauma led to her specialized training. Caroline stepped closer to Nathan, her medical training allowing her to read his body language with clinical precision. Are you questioning my daughter's mental health, Mr. Lane? Not at all, Nathan said quickly. I'm simply concerned about community harmony. Sunset Hills is a peaceful town, and we want to keep it that way. I couldn't agree more, Caroline replied, which is why I'm sure you'll want to know that my daughter's actions this week prevented what could have been a serious assault on a local student. Detective Fox described her intervention as exemplary citizenship. Nathan's carefully maintained expression flickered with annoyance. He had arrived expecting to intimidate a single mother into controlling her daughter's behavior, but Caroline Knight was proving more formidable than anticipated. Dr. Knight, I think there may be a misunderstanding here, Nathan said, shifting tactics. I'm not criticizing Vera's actions this week. I'm concerned about future incidents. What future incidents? Young people with her capabilities might be tempted to use violence to solve problems that could be handled through proper channels, Nathan explained. I'd hate to see her make choices that could affect her future opportunities. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Nathan Lane had significant influence over college recommendations, scholarship opportunities, and community standing. Caroline recognized the implicit message: control your daughter or face consequences. Mr. Lane, Caroline said quietly, my daughter learned her values from a decorated Army Ranger who gave his life serving this country. Those values include protecting the innocent and standing up to bullies, regardless of their age, size, or social position. Nathan's face flushed slightly at the implied criticism. I'm sure your late husband was a fine soldier, but military solutions don't always translate well to civilian communities. On the contrary, Caroline replied, military families understand honor, duty, and sacrifice in ways that might benefit some civilian communities. Vera emerged from the treatment area, having finished her tasks. She moved with the quiet confidence that had become her trademark, and Nathan found himself reassessing his assumptions about the small teenager who had dominated his daughter's attention all week. "Mr. Lane," Vera said politely, "I understand. You have concerns about my behavior at school." Nathan studied her carefully, looking for signs of the aggression Ruby had described. Instead, he saw a composed young woman who showed appropriate respect while maintaining dignified self-possession. "I'm concerned about any student who might feel empowered to take justice into their own hands," Nathan said carefully. "Justice and self-defense are different things," Vera replied calmly. "I defended Luna Pierce from harassment by individuals with a documented history of predatory behavior. I used minimum necessary force and immediately contacted appropriate authorities." "But you did use force," Nathan pressed. "When someone attempts to grab a teenage girl against her will, force becomes necessary," Vera said simply. "I'm surprised that concept troubles you." Nathan realized he was losing control of the conversation. Ruby had described Vera as sullen and antisocial, someone who could be easily pressured through official channels. Instead, he faced a young woman who spoke with quiet authority and had clear support from her obviously capable mother. "Perhaps we should schedule a meeting with Principal Stone to discuss these issues," Nathan suggested, playing his institutional card. "Excellent idea," Caroline said immediately. "I'm sure Principal Stone would be interested in discussing how community leaders respond to students who protect their classmates from assault." Nathan recognized that his intimidation attempt had failed completely. Worse, he had revealed his motivations clearly enough that the Knights would be prepared for future pressure. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, preparing to retreat. "I was simply trying to be helpful." "Your concern is noted," Caroline replied formally. After Nathan left, mother and daughter worked together in companionable silence for several minutes, processing the encounter and its implications. "That was about Ruby feeling threatened by the attention you're receiving," Caroline observed finally. "I know," Vera replied, "but it was also about testing whether we could be intimidated through political pressure. And now he knows we can't be, which means he'll try different tactics," Vera concluded. "Ruby's father doesn't strike me as someone who accepts defeat gracefully." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Phoenix Dean's pickup truck, an unexpected Saturday visitor that caught both women by surprise. Phoenix emerged from the vehicle carrying a small cardboard box, his usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious nervousness. "Dr. Knight," Phoenix said as he approached the clinic entrance, "I'm sorry to bother you on a weekend, but I found an injured hawk near our construction site, and I wasn't sure who else to call." Caroline's professional instincts immediately took over. "Bring it inside quickly. What kind of injury?" "Wing damage, I think. It can't fly, but it's still fighting." "Mad." Vera watched Phoenix carefully handle the box containing the injured bird, noting his gentle movements and genuine concern for the animal's welfare. This was a side of the popular quarterback that few students had probably seen. "Set it on the examination table," Caroline instructed, pulling on protective gloves. "Vera, prepare the restraint equipment." For the next hour, the three worked together to treat the hawk's injuries. Phoenix proved surprisingly useful as an assistant, following Caroline's instructions precisely while Vera managed the bird's powerful talons and sharp beak. "Fractured radius," Caroline diagnosed after careful examination. "Probably flew into a power line or vehicle. The good news is that it should heal completely with proper care." "What kind of care?" Phoenix asked. 6 weeks of restricted movement, proper nutrition, medication for infection prevention," Caroline explained. "Then gradual reintroduction to flight activities." Phoenix looked thoughtful. "Could I help with that? I mean, if you need someone to assist with the rehabilitation process." Caroline exchanged glances with Vera, both surprised by his offer. It's a significant time commitment, Caroline warned. Daily feeding, cleaning, monitoring for complications. I've got time, Phoenix said, and I'd like to learn more about wildlife rehabilitation. Why? Vera asked directly. Phoenix considered his answer carefully. Because I've spent most of my life focused on things that only matter to me. Football, social status, getting attention. But watching you this week, seeing how you put yourself at risk for Luna's safety, it made me realize that maybe I should care about something bigger than myself. Caroline studied Phoenix's earnest expression, recognizing the sincerity behind his words. All right, but if you're serious about this, you'll need to learn proper procedures and commit to the full rehabilitation timeline. I'm serious, Phoenix said firmly. Over the following hours, Caroline taught Phoenix the basics of raptor care while Vera observed his dedication and patience. By afternoon, the quarterback who had initially dismissed her as the ghost girl was carefully hand-feeding an injured hawk while discussing conservation principles with surprising insight. Your friends are going to think you've lost your mind, Vera commented as Phoenix prepared to leave. Probably, Phoenix agreed, but I'm starting to think my friends don't know me as well as they think they do. People change, Vera said simply. Some people change, Phoenix corrected. Others just discover who they were supposed to be all along. After Phoenix left, Vera helped her mother close the clinic while considering the day's unexpected developments. Nathan Lane's visit had revealed the political complexities she would face as her visibility increased, while Phoenix's genuine interest in learning suggested that her influence might extend in positive directions she hadn't anticipated. You're thinking hard about something, Caroline observed. I'm thinking about responsibility, Vera replied. About what happens when people start looking to you for leadership you're not sure you're ready to provide. Your father struggled with the same question when he was promoted to colonel, Caroline said gently. He told me that leadership isn't about being ready. It's about accepting responsibility and growing into it. But what if I make mistakes? What if my decisions hurt people? Caroline stopped working and looked directly at her daughter. Then, you learn from those mistakes and make better decisions next time. But refusing to act when you have the ability to help people isn't protecting them from your potential mistakes. It's abandoning them to face problems alone. Sunday brought a different kind of challenge when Vera received a text message from an unknown number. Heard you like to fight. Let's see how tough you really are. Monday after school, Old Quarry Road. Come alone if you're not scared. Vera showed the message to her mother, who immediately called Detective Fox. The detective arrived within an hour, her professional demeanor unable to completely mask her concern. This has Dylan Crawford written all over it, Detective Fox said, after examining the phone. He was released from custody yesterday, and his ego is probably bruised worse than his wrist. Are you going to arrest him? Caroline asked. For sending a text message? I wish I could, but this doesn't quite meet the threshold for a terroristic threat charge, Detective Fox replied. However, I can definitely increase patrols around the school and your property. What if Vera doesn't respond to the message? Caroline suggested. Then Crawford escalates until he gets the confrontation he wants, Detective Fox said grimly. Guys like him don't let public humiliation go unanswered. Vera had been listening without comment, but now she looked up from the phone. What if I do respond, but not the way he expects? Absolutely not, Caroline said immediately. You are not meeting that boy anywhere alone. I didn't say I would meet him alone, Vera clarified. But ignoring the challenge won't make him disappear. It'll just give him time to plan something worse. Detective Fox leaned forward with interest. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that bullies rely on isolation and secrecy to maintain their advantage, Vera said. What if we remove both elements? Explain, Detective Fox prompted. Crawford. wants a private confrontation where he can use size and aggression to reassert dominance. But what if the confrontation happens in a public setting with proper supervision and legal oversight? Caroline looked confused. You want to fight him in public. I want to demonstrate that his intimidation tactics don't work, Vera corrected. There's a difference. Detective Fox was quiet for several minutes, considering the proposal. It's risky, she said finally, but it might be the cleanest way to end this situation before it escalates further. What did you have in mind? Caroline asked reluctantly. Vera looked between her mother and Detective Fox, her expression serious but determined. Coach Woods mentioned that the school board is considering self-defense instruction. What if we accelerated that timeline and made Crawford's challenge into an educational demonstration? A demonstration of what? Of how proper training and preparation can neutralize physical intimidation, Vera explained. Crawford thinks he can use his size and aggression to dominate anyone smaller than him. But those advantages disappear when his opponent has superior technique and training. Detective Fox nodded slowly. You're talking about turning his challenge into a controlled sparring match with proper safety equipment and supervision. Exactly. Public setting, official oversight, educational purpose. Crawford gets his confrontation, but on terms that favor skill over size. Caroline remained skeptical. What if you lose? What if he's stronger than you anticipated? Vera met her mother's gaze steadily. Then I learned something valuable about my limitations, and Crawford earns his victory through legitimate means rather than intimidation. And if you win, then every potential bully in the county learns that size and aggression aren't automatic guarantees of dominance, Vera replied. Sometimes that lesson is worth the risk. Detective Fox stood and paced to the window, thinking through the legal and practical implications. I'd need to coordinate with school administration, ensure proper medical supervision, establish clear rules of engagement. Is it possible? Caroline asked. It's unprecedented, Detective Fox said. But given the circumstances and the educational benefits, it might be justifiable. Vera pulled out her phone and began typing a response to Crawford's message. Then let's give Mr. Crawford the confrontation he wants, just not the way he expects it. As she sent the message proposing a public demonstration match instead of a private fight, Vera understood that she was crossing another threshold in her journey from invisible transfer student to community leader. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was no longer facing them alone. The evening passed quietly as mother and daughter prepared for whatever consequences Vera's counter-proposal might bring. Outside, autumn wind rattled the windows of their small house, carrying the promise of changes that would reshape not just their own lives, but the entire social fabric of Sunset Hills. Whatever happens tomorrow, Caroline said as they turned. Off the lights, your father would be proud of the young woman you've become. I hope so, Vera replied. I'm trying to honor everything he taught me while figuring out who I need to be for this community. That's all any of us can do, Caroline said gently. Take the lessons we've learned and adapt them to the challenges we face. As Vera settled into sleep, she reflected on the weekend's revelations. Nathan Lane's intimidation attempt had shown her the political dimensions of her changing status, while Phoenix's genuine transformation suggested that her influence could inspire positive growth in unexpected places. Tomorrow would test whether her tactical thinking could transform a dangerous confrontation into an educational opportunity that served the broader community. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel cautiously optimistic about the direction her life was taking in this small Ohio town that was rapidly becoming home. Monday morning transformed Principal Eric Stone's office into an unlikely war room as Detective Fox, Coach Woods, and Dr. Caroline Knight gathered around his mahogany desk. The late October sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating stacks of policy manuals and incident reports that reflected the unprecedented nature of their discussion. "Let me understand this correctly," Principal Stone said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he reviewed Detective Fox's proposal. "You want to authorize a supervised combat demonstration between a high school student and a college-age individual who has threatened her with physical violence." "Not combat," Detective Fox corrected firmly. "Educational demonstration of self-defense principles using proper safety equipment and medical supervision." Coach Woods leaned forward in her chair, her compact frame radiating intensity. "Eric, we've been discussing enhanced security measures for months. This situation provides an opportunity to demonstrate practical applications while addressing a specific threat. The liability issues alone could destroy the school district," Principal Stone protested. "What happens if someone gets seriously injured during this demonstration? What happens if Crawford escalates his intimidation campaign and corners Vera in an unsupervised setting?" Caroline countered. "At least this way, we control the circumstances and ensure proper safety protocols." Principal Stone walked to his window, looking out at students arriving for morning classes. In 23 years of educational administration, he had never faced a situation that required such creative problem-solving. "The school board will have serious concerns about this precedent. The school board should have serious concerns about students being threatened by outside aggressors," Detective Fox said bluntly. "Crawford's message constitutes harassment at minimum, and his history suggests escalation toward more serious crimes." "What exactly would this demonstration entail?" Principal Stone asked, returning to his desk. Coach Woods opened a folder containing preliminary safety protocols. "Controlled sparring match using protective equipment from our wrestling program. Medical personnel on standby, clear rules of engagement, educational commentary for observers." Observers. The demonstration would be open to students, parents, and community members interested in self-defense education, Caroline explained. "Transparency serves multiple purposes: public accountability, educational value, and community awareness." Of these issues, Principal Stone reviewed the proposal documents, his administrative mind wrestling with competing priorities. "And Miss Knight has agreed to this arrangement?" "She proposed it," Detective Fox said. Vera understood that ignoring Crawford's challenge would likely lead to escalation in less controlled circumstances. "Where is Miss Knight now?" Principal Stone asked, glancing at his clock. "In first period, conducting herself as a model student. Despite being targeted for harassment," Caroline replied with obvious pride. Meanwhile, in Mrs. Park's history classroom, Vera sat through a discussion of asymmetric warfare tactics, finding uncomfortable parallels between historical military strategies and her current social situation. Around her, classmates participated in the lesson without awareness of the administrative meetings that would shape their school's immediate future. "Miss Knight," Mrs. Park called, drawing Vera from her distracted thoughts. "Can you explain why smaller forces sometimes prevail against larger, better-equipped opponents?" Vera looked up, realizing that the question carried personal resonance beyond its academic context. "Superior tactics, better intelligence, and more precise objectives," she replied carefully. "Large forces often assume that size guarantees victory, but they become overconfident and make strategic errors. Elaborate on that tactical concept." "When you're outmatched in raw strength, you compensate through preparation, positioning, and timing. You choose the battlefield, control the circumstances, and use your opponent's assumptions against them." Vera paused, aware that her classmates were listening with unusual attention. But the most important factor is having a clear understanding of what you're actually trying to accomplish. Phoenix Dean, sitting 3 rows away, caught the subtle implications in Vera's answer. He had spent enough time around military strategy discussions with his grandfather to recognize tactical thinking when he heard it. After class, Phoenix intercepted Vera in the hallway. That was an interesting analysis of asymmetric warfare. It's an interesting historical topic, Vera replied neutrally. Are we still talking about history? Phoenix asked perceptively. Vera studied his face, recognizing genuine concern rather than idle curiosity. Sometimes historical principles apply to contemporary situations. And sometimes contemporary situations require historical solutions, Phoenix said. My grandfather used to say that the best warriors choose their battles carefully. Did he also mention that some battles choose you regardless of your preferences? Phoenix nodded slowly. He said those were the most important ones to win. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Ruby Lane, flanked by her usual entourage and wearing an expression that combined smug satisfaction with barely controlled hostility. Well, if it isn't our resident violence expert, Ruby said loudly enough to attract attention from passing students. I heard you're planning some kind of exhibition match. How very primitive. Ruby, Phoenix said warningly, but she ignored him. I mean, most people solve their problems through civilized discussion, Ruby continued, her voice dripping with false concern. But I suppose when you're raised around military brutality, violence seems like the natural solution to everything. Vera felt her temper flare at the deliberate insult to her father's memory, but she kept her voice level. Your concern is noted, Ruby. Oh, I'm not concerned about you, Ruby replied with a venomous smile. I'm concerned about the message we're sending to younger students. That might make right, that physical intimidation is acceptable behavior. You're absolutely right, Vera said calmly, surprising Ruby with her agreement. Physical intimidation is unacceptable behavior. That's exactly why it needs to be addressed directly rather than ignored. Ruby's confident expression faltered slightly as she realized her criticism had been redirected. That's not what I meant. What did you mean? Vera asked with genuine curiosity. Before Ruby could formulate a response, Luna Pierce appeared at Vera's elbow, her quiet presence somehow shifting the dynamic of the confrontation. The bell's about to ring, Luna said softly. We should get to chemistry. As they walked away, Ruby's frustrated voice carried after them. This isn't over, Knight. Some of us care about maintaining civilized standards in this community. Some of us care about protecting people who can't protect themselves, Vera replied without turning around. During chemistry class, word began spreading through unofficial channels about the administrative meetings taking place in Principal Stone's office. By lunch period, speculation had reached fever pitch among students who sensed that something significant was developing. Jade Rivera approached Vera's table where she sat with Luna, Phoenix, and Tucker West, her student council responsibilities. Having provided inside information about the morning's discussions, is it true that you're going to fight Dylan Crawford in some kind of official school event? Jade asked directly. Where did you hear that? Vera replied. Student government gets briefed on unusual administrative decisions, Jade explained. Principal Stone wanted our input on community reaction to proposed safety demonstrations. Tucker looked up from his sandwich with obvious alarm. You're actually going to fight that psycho? Vera, he's huge and completely unhinged. If it happens, it won't be a fight, Vera corrected. It would be an educational demonstration with proper safety protocols and supervision. What's the difference? Tucker asked. Phoenix answered before Vera could respond. The difference is preparation, rules, and objectives. A fight is about dominance and ego. A demonstration is about education and community safety. Luna nodded thoughtfully. Like the difference between street violence and martial arts competition. Exactly, Vera confirmed. The physical techniques might look similar, but the context and purpose change everything. And you think Crawford will accept those limitations? Jade asked skeptically. I think Crawford will participate because his ego won't allow him to back down from a public challenge, Vera replied. Whether he accepts the educational framework is secondary to achieving the primary objective, which is demonstrating that size and aggression don't guarantee victory over preparation and skill, Vera explained. Every potential bully in the county will be watching. The lesson they learn will influence their future behavior toward other potential victims. Phoenix studied Vera's expression, recognizing the strategic thinking that elevated her perspective beyond personal conflict. You're not just defending yourself, you're defending every future target of bullying behavior. Someone has to, Vera said simply. Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Detective Fox, who entered the cafeteria with obvious purpose. Students throughout the room paused their conversations as the detective approached Vera's table. Miss Knight, Detective Fox said formally, Principal Stone would like to speak with you in his office. As Vera gathered her belongings, she caught Phoenix's concerned expression. It's all right, she said quietly. This is just the administrative process. We'll be here when you get back, Phoenix promised. The walk to Principal Stone's office felt longer than usual, with curious students tracking their movement through the hallways. Vera understood that whatever decision emerged from this meeting would reshape her role in the community, for better or worse. Principal Stone's office now contained additional chairs accommodating the expanded group of adults who would determine the feasibility of Vera's proposal. She recognized Dr. Patricia Wells, the school's consulting physician, and Superintendent Margaret Foster, whose presence indicated district-level consideration of the issue. Miss Knight, Principal Stone began formally, we've been discussing your proposal for addressing Mr. Crawford's threatening behavior through an educational demonstration. Yes, sir, Vera replied, taking the offered chair. Before we proceed, I need to understand your motivations clearly, Superintendent Foster interjected. Are you seeking personal vindication, or do you genuinely believe this approach serves broader educational purposes? Vera considered the question carefully, aware that her answer would influence the final decision. Ma'am, personal vindication would be satisfied by simply avoiding Mr. Crawford or having him arrested for harassment. But avoidance doesn't protect other potential victims, and arrest doesn't address the underlying behavioral patterns that create these situations. Explain what you mean by underlying behavioral patterns, Dr. Wells prompted. Bullies rely on community tolerance of their behavior, Vera said. They test boundaries incrementally, escalating until someone stops them decisively. If Crawford's intimidation succeeds against me, he'll apply the same tactics to other targets who might be less prepared to defend themselves. Coach Woods nodded approvingly. That's consistent with research on predatory behavior patterns, but you're asking us to authorize what amounts to sanctioned violence between students and non-students, Superintendent Foster pointed out. The precedent concerns are significant. I understand those concerns, Vera replied, but the precedent already exists. Crawford and others like him are already using violence and intimidation against students. The question is whether educational institutions will address that reality proactively or continue pretending it doesn't exist. Detective Fox leaned forward. Miss Knight raises a valid point about institutional response. We can arrest Crawford after he commits assault, but that doesn't undo the trauma to his victims or deter similar behavior from others. What are you proposing as specific safety measures? Dr. Wells asked. Coach Woods opened her folder of prepared protocols. Full protective equipment including headgear and padding, medical personnel on immediate standby, strictly enforced rules of engagement, and immediate termination if safety guidelines are violated. And the educational component? Live commentary explaining self-defense principles, discussion of legal aspects of personal protection, and community resources for victims of harassment, Caroline added. The demonstration becomes a teaching tool rather than entertainment. Principal Stone studied the assembled group, weighing competing administrative pressures against community safety needs. Assuming we approve this proposal, what timeline are we considering? Crawford's challenge specified today after school, Detective Fox said. Delaying would allow time for rumor and speculation to escalate the situation beyond our control. Today? Superintendent Foster looked alarmed. That's insufficient time for proper preparation and community notification. Ma'am, Vera interjected respectfully, the community will be notified regardless of our timeline. The question is whether that notification includes accurate information about safety measures and educational objectives. She's right, Caroline said. Word is already spreading among students. If we postpone, speculation will fill the information vacuum. Superintendent Foster exchanged glances with Principal Stone, both recognizing the political and practical complexities of their decision. Dr. Wells, from a medical standpoint, can you ensure participant safety with the proposed protocols? With proper equipment and strict adherence to safety rules, the risk level would be comparable to authorized wrestling matches or football practice, Dr. Wells replied. I can't eliminate all risk, but I can manage it within acceptable parameters. And legally? Principal Stone asked Detective Fox. Both participants would be volunteers engaging in supervised athletic activity on school property with parental consent and official oversight, Detective Fox said. The legal framework exists within our current policies for contact sports. The room fell silent as the decision-makers processed the unprecedented nature of their situation. Finally, Superintendent Foster spoke with careful deliberation. Miss Knight, I want to be absolutely clear about something. If we authorize this demonstration, you will be representing not just yourself, but the values and capabilities of our entire educational community. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Vera met the superintendent's gaze steadily. Yes, ma'am. I've been preparing for that responsibility my entire life. Then we'll proceed with the demonstration, Superintendent Foster decided, but with strict conditions and comprehensive safety oversight. As the meeting concluded with detailed planning for the afternoon's event, Vera understood that she had crossed another threshold in her journey from anonymous transfer student to community representative. The weight of expectation was significant, but so was the opportunity to demonstrate that strength could serve justice rather than dominance. Walking back to class, she reflected on her father's teachings about leadership under pressure. Colonel James Knight had faced countless situations where individual decisions carried consequences for entire units, and he had taught her that courage meant accepting responsibility rather than seeking glory. This afternoon would test everything. She had learned about tactics, preparation, and moral purpose, but for the first time since arriving in Sunset Hills, Vera felt like she was moving toward her true calling rather than hiding from her past. The final bell would bring more than the end of another school day. It would bring the moment when theory transformed into practice, and when the quiet girl who had tried to remain invisible would step into the light as a defender of those who needed protection. The final bell at Sunset Hills High School released students into an afternoon unlike any in the school's history. Word of the approved demonstration had spread through social media and text messages, creating an electric atmosphere of anticipation mixed with nervous energy. Parents began arriving in the school parking lot alongside curious community members, drawn by reports of an unprecedented educational event. Dylan Crawford sat in his blue pickup truck at the edge of school property, flanked by Brett Mason and Cal Torres, who had reluctantly agreed to support their friend despite serious reservations about the escalating situation. Dylan's right wrist bore an elastic brace from Thursday's encounter, a constant reminder of his humiliation that fueled his determination for redemption. "This is insane," Kyle muttered for the third time in 10 minutes. "Fighting a high school. Kid in front of half the town. What if the cops arrest us?" "It's not fighting, it's an educational demonstration," Dylan replied mockingly. "Besides, cops are already involved. That detective lady set this whole thing up." Brett studied the growing crowd near the gymnasium entrance with growing unease. "There's a lot more people here than I expected. This was supposed to be about teaching the little girl a lesson, not putting on a show for the whole county." "Good," Dylan said grimly. "More people means more witnesses when I show everyone that size and strength still matter more than fancy martial arts moves." But even as he spoke with confident bravado, Dylan felt uncertainty gnawing at his resolve. Vera Knight's clinical efficiency in their previous encounter had shaken assumptions he had held his entire adult life about physical dominance and intimidation tactics. Inside the school, Vera completed her methodical preparation routine in the girls' locker room, changing into athletic wear that would allow unrestricted movement while providing appropriate coverage for a public demonstration. Coach Woods observed her students' calm focus with professional appreciation, recognizing the mental discipline that separated elite athletes from casual participants. "How are you feeling?" Coach Woods asked, as Vera secured her long hair in a impractical braid. "Focused," Vera replied simply. "Nervous energy is normal before competition, but anxiety indicates inadequate preparation." "This isn't competition, it's education," Coach Woods reminded her gently. "The principles are the same. Clear objectives, thorough preparation, adaptation to changing circumstances." Vera stood and performed a series of stretching movements that demonstrated her impressive flexibility. "My father used to say that confidence comes from knowing you've done everything possible to prepare for success, and if Crawford doesn't follow the safety protocols, then the demonstration ends immediately, and legal consequences address his violation of agreed-upon terms," Vera said calmly. "But he'll follow the protocols because his ego requires public vindication, not private assault." Coach Woods nodded, impressed by Vera's tactical analysis, even as she felt protective concern for her student. "Remember, the moment you feel unsafe or overwhelmed, you signal for termination." "I understand," Vera replied, though both women knew that Vera's definition of unsafe probably differed significantly from most people's comfort zones. Meanwhile, Phoenix Dean paced nervously outside the gymnasium, his usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious anxiety about the upcoming demonstration. Luna Pierce and Tucker West flanked him, forming an unlikely support group united by concern for their friend's welfare. "She knows what she's doing," Luna said for the fourth time, trying to convince herself as much as the others. "I know she does," Phoenix replied. "That's not what worries me." "What does worry you?" Tucker asked. Phoenix paused in his pacing, considering how to articulate his concerns. Crawford's not just big, he's desperate. Desperate people make unpredictable choices, and unpredictable choices can lead to serious injuries regardless of skill levels. "So you think she shouldn't do this?" Luna asked. "I think she's the only person who can do this," Phoenix said with quiet intensity. "But that doesn't mean I have to like watching someone I care about put herself at risk for the rest of us." Luna and Tucker exchanged meaningful glances, both noting Phoenix's choice of words and the emotion behind them. Inside the gymnasium, the transformation was remarkable. What had been a standard high school athletic facility now resembled a professional sporting venue, complete with protective mats, medical equipment, and designated areas for spectators. Dr. Wells supervised the placement of emergency medical supplies, while Detective Fox coordinated with Officer Bradley to ensure crowd control and safety oversight. Principal Stone stood near the center of the space, addressing the growing crowd of students, parents, and community members who had gathered for this unprecedented event. "Ladies and gentlemen," Principal Stone announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed gymnasium, "what you are about to witness is an educational demonstration of self-defense principles and conflict resolution strategies. This is not entertainment or sport. It is a teaching tool designed to promote community safety and awareness." Superintendent Foster took the microphone next, her authoritative presence commanding attention from the diverse audience. "The participants have volunteered for this demonstration under strict safety protocols and medical supervision. Our objective is education about personal protection and community responsibility." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people recognized the seriousness of the official presentation. Near the back of the gymnasium, Nathan Lane stood with several other school board members, his expression tightly controlled as he observed an event he had tried unsuccessfully to prevent. Ruby Lane positioned herself prominently among her classmates, her carefully applied makeup unable to disguise the bitter satisfaction in her expression. She had convinced herself that Crawford's superior size would result in Vera's humiliation, restoring what Ruby considered the proper social order. "There's no way that little girl can handle someone Crawford's size," Ruby whispered to Samantha Wells. "This is going to be embarrassing for everyone involved." "I don't know," Samantha replied uncertainly. "Remember what happened to those college guys last week?" "Those guys weren't expecting trouble," Ruby said dismissively. "Crawford knows exactly what he's getting into." But as Dylan Crawford entered the gymnasium, flanked by his uncomfortable companions, even Ruby began to sense that the situation might not unfold according to her expectations. Crawford's swagger seemed forced, and his bandaged wrist served as a visible reminder that Vera Knight was not the helpless victim she appeared to be. Dr. Wells approached Crawford with professional efficiency, conducting a brief medical assessment to ensure his fitness for participation. "Any injuries or medical conditions that might be aggravated by physical activity?" she asked. "Just a sprained wrist from last week," Crawford replied, flexing his hand to demonstrate mobility. "The safety protocols require protective headgear and padding," Dr. Wells explained. "Are you comfortable with those restrictions?" Crawford hesitated, recognizing that protective equipment would limit his ability to intimidate through raw aggression. "I thought this was supposed to be realistic self-defense." "Realistic self-defense that doesn't result in serious injuries to participants," Detective Fox interjected firmly. "The equipment is non-negotiable." As Crawford reluctantly agreed to the safety requirements, Vera emerged from the locker room area, accompanied by Coach Woods. The gymnasium fell silent as people got their first clear look at the small teenager, who had volunteered to face a man nearly twice her size. Vera moved with fluid grace, her athletic wear revealing the lean muscle definition that came from years of elite training. But what impressed observers most was her calm demeanor, no bravado, no showmanship, just quiet confidence that suggested complete preparation for the task ahead. "Holy shit," someone whispered from the student section. "She looks like she could take on a whole football team." Phoenix felt his breath catch as he watched Vera accept protective equipment from Coach Woods. Despite her small stature, there was something undeniably formidable about her presence, a contained power that became more apparent in this formal setting. Dr. Wells addressed both participants as they completed their equipment checks. This demonstration will be terminated immediately if safety protocols are violated or if either participant requests cessation. Medical personnel are standing by for any injuries or complications. Detective Fox stepped forward with official authority. The rules are simple. No strikes to the head or neck, no techniques designed to cause permanent injury, immediate compliance with termination signals. This is education, not combat. Crawford nodded impatiently, his focus entirely on Vera as she performed final stretching movements. At 6'4" and 250 pounds, he held obvious physical advantages, but something in Vera's preparation routine suggested that size might not determine the demonstration's outcome. Participants to the center, Coach Woods announced. Vera and Crawford moved to the designated area, the contrast between them stark enough to generate worried murmurs from the audience. Standing face to face, Crawford's size advantage seemed even more pronounced, leading some observers to question the wisdom of the approved demonstration. "You sure about this, little girl?" Crawford asked quietly, his voice carrying just enough menace to remind everyone of the underlying threat. "I'm sure," Vera replied calmly, her grey eyes meeting his gaze without flinching. "Because once this starts, I'm not going to take it easy on you just because you're small." "I wouldn't expect you to," Vera said simply. "That wouldn't serve the educational objectives." Crawford's confident expression flickered with uncertainty as he processed her response. He had expected fear, defiance, or bravado, emotions he knew how to exploit. Instead, he faced professional composure that suggested capabilities he might have underestimated. Coach Woods raised her hand for attention. "The demonstration will begin with basic positioning and defensive stances, then progress through escalating scenarios that simulate real-world confrontations. Participants assume ready positions." Vera settled into a balanced stance that looked deceptively casual, her weight evenly distributed and her hands relaxed at her sides. Crawford adopted what he considered an intimidating posture. Shoulders squared and fists partially raised, the gymnasium fell completely silent as the community of Sunset Hills prepared to witness an educational event that would reshape their understanding of strength, courage, and protection. But as the demonstration officially began, none of the observers could have anticipated the profound lessons they were about to learn about the difference between force and power. "Scenario 1, Coach Woods announced. Verbal intimidation escalating to physical threat. Crawford begin with aggressive posturing and verbal harassment." Crawford stepped closer to Vera, using his height advantage to loom over her smaller frame. "Listen here, you little freak. You think you're tough, but I'm going to show everyone what happens when kids try to play with adults." Vera remained motionless, her expression unchanged by the verbal assault. "Harassment noted," she said clearly, "requesting that you cease threatening behavior and maintain appropriate distance." "Or what?" Crawford sneered, taking another step forward until he was close enough to intimidate through physical proximity. "Or, I will defend myself using minimum necessary force," Vera replied calmly. Coach Woods provided commentary for the audience. "Notice how Miss Knight maintains composure under verbal pressure while clearly communicating boundaries. She's not escalating the confrontation, but she's also not retreating from reasonable self-protection." Crawford, playing his assigned role perhaps too enthusiastically, reached out toward Vera's shoulder in a gesture designed to demonstrate dominance through unwanted physical contact. What happened next would be discussed and analyzed by the Sunset Hills community for years to come. Vera moved with liquid precision, intercepting Crawford's reaching hand and redirecting his momentum in a way that sent him stumbling sideways while she remained perfectly balanced. The movement was so smooth and efficient that many observers initially missed its significance. Defensive redirection, Coach Woods explained to the fascinated audience. Superior technique neutralizes size advantage through leverage and timing. Rather than opposing force directly, Crawford regained his balance, his face flushing with embarrassment at being outmaneuvered so easily. "Lucky shot," he muttered, preparing for a more aggressive approach. "Scenario 2, Coach Woods announced. Physical assault initiation. Crawford, simulate an actual attack while maintaining safety protocols." This time, Crawford abandoned pretense, lunging forward with enough force to overwhelm most opponents through sheer size and aggression. But Vera was no longer there when he arrived. She had moved laterally with dancer-like grace, allowing Crawford's momentum to carry him past her while she maintained perfect positioning for counteraction. As he stumbled forward off balance, Vera applied a precise joint manipulation that brought him to his knees without causing injury. The gymnasium erupted in surprised murmurs as the audience witnessed a demonstration of skill that transcended anything they had imagined possible. Crawford found himself on the mat, completely controlled by a teenager half his size, his supposed advantages neutralized through superior technique and preparation. "Submission without injury," Dr. Wells observed approvingly. "Textbook application of leverage and anatomical knowledge." Crawford struggled against Vera's hold, his frustration mounting as he realized that brute strength couldn't overcome properly applied technique. "Let me up," he demanded. "Do you acknowledge that verbal harassment and physical intimidation are unacceptable behaviors?" Vera asked calmly, maintaining her controlling position. "Let me up," Crawford repeated more loudly. "Answer the question," Detective Fox instructed firmly. Crawford's face burned with humiliation as he recognized that his public vindication had become public defeat. "Fine, whatever, harassment is wrong." Vera released him immediately, stepping back to allow him space to regain his footing while remaining ready for continued aggression. "Thank you for that acknowledgement." As Crawford stood and brushed off his protective gear, the reality of his situation became clear to everyone present. The large, aggressive young man who had terrorized Luna Pierce and threatened Vera Knight had been systematically outclassed by superior preparation and skill. But the demonstration was far from over, and the most important lessons were yet to be taught to a community, learning to redefine their understanding of strength and protection. The demonstration entered its third phase as Crawford struggled to reconcile his damaged pride with the undeniable reality of his situation. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool gymnasium air, and his previous confidence had evaporated into nervous aggression that made him more dangerous rather than more effective. "Scenario 3, Coach Woods announced to the captivated audience. "Multiple attacker simulation. Mr. Torres and Mr. Mason, please join the demonstration as additional threats while maintaining all safety protocols." Kyle Torres and Brett Mason exchanged uncertain glances before reluctantly stepping onto the mat. Neither had wanted to participate originally, and witnessing Crawford's systematic dismantling had only intensified their reluctance. "This is bullshit," Kyle muttered under his breath as he accepted protective equipment from Dr. Wells. "We're going to look like idiots." "We already look like idiots," Brett replied grimly. "Question is whether we make it worse or just get through this." Vera observed the new participants with tactical assessment, noting their body language and positioning. Kyle appeared nervous and likely to hesitate at crucial moments, while Brett showed signs of underlying anger that could lead to unpredictable behavior. 3 against 1 isn't fair," came a worried voice from the student section. "It's realistic," Detective Fox responded, addressing the crowd. "Predators often work in groups because they rely on numerical advantage to overcome resistance. Understanding How to handle multiple attackers is essential for comprehensive self-defense education. Principal Stone stepped forward with additional clarification. This scenario demonstrates why proper training and preparation matter more than physical size or number of opponents. Notice how Miss Knight maintains awareness of all three participants while controlling distance and positioning. The three young men arranged themselves in a loose triangle around Vera, Crawford taking the lead position while his companions flanked her sides. The size disparity was now even more pronounced, with three grown men surrounding a teenage girl who appeared almost fragile by comparison. Beginning coordinated approach, Coach Woods announced. Participants simulate realistic group intimidation tactics. Crawford began with renewed verbal aggression, his humiliation fueling desperate attempts to reassert dominance. This time there's nowhere to run, little girl. 3 of us, 1 of you. Let's see how tough you really are. Vera rotated slowly, keeping all 3 men within her visual field while maintaining balanced positioning. I'm requesting that you cease threatening behavior and disperse peacefully. Not happening, Brett Mason said, his thin face twisted with anger at being forced into this public spectacle. You wanted to embarrass us. Now it's your turn. Kyle Torres remained silent, his nervous energy making him shift constantly from foot to foot. His reluctance was obvious to everyone present, but peer pressure and loyalty to his friends kept him in formation. Notice how Miss Knight positions herself to prevent encirclement, Coach Woods explained to the audience. She's using the gymnasium walls to limit approach angles while maintaining mobility options. The 3 men began closing their circle, but Vera's movement disrupted their coordination. She flowed between their positions like water, never allowing them to establish the containment they needed for numerical advantage. Grab her, Crawford shouted in frustration as Vera slipped past his reaching hands for the 3rd time. Kyle lunged forward, finally committing to the coordinated attack, but found himself redirected into Brett's path. The two collided awkwardly, while Vera remained untouched, having used Kyle's momentum against his companion. Redirection of force to create confusion among multiple attackers, Dr. Wells observed approvingly. Superior situational awareness prevents coordination between opponents. Crawford, desperate to salvage something from the increasingly humiliating situation, abandoned the safety protocols and charged directly at Vera with significantly more force than the demonstration rules allowed. The change in his behavior was immediately apparent to everyone present. His attack carried genuine malicious intent rather than educational simulation, crossing the line from demonstration to actual assault. Vera responded accordingly. Her defensive movement this time incorporated the full scope of her combat training, not just the limited techniques appropriate for educational demonstration. Crawford found himself airborne, his charge redirected into a throw that sent him crashing to the mat with enough force to drive the air from his lungs. Demonstration terminated, Detective Fox announced immediately, stepping onto the mat as medical personnel moved toward Crawford. Safety protocols have been violated. Dr. Wells knelt beside Crawford, conducting a rapid assessment while he gasped for breath. Possible rib bruising, definitely winded. No apparent serious injuries, but we'll need X-rays to be certain. The gymnasium buzzed with excited conversation as students and adults processed what they had witnessed. Crawford's violation of the safety rules had prompted a response that demonstrated the full extent of Vera's capabilities, leaving no doubt about the outcome of any genuine confrontation. Ruby Lane stood frozen among her classmates, her carefully constructed worldview crumbling, as she watched the man she had expected to humiliate Vera instead being examined by medical personnel. Her father's influence, her social status, her assumptions about power and dominance all seemed suddenly irrelevant in the face of demonstrated competence. That was incredible, Luna whispered to Phoenix, who was staring at Vera with something approaching awe. I knew she was trained, but that was like watching a professional. That was a professional, Phoenix replied quietly. We've been going to school with someone who could probably handle half the guys on our football team simultaneously. Tucker West shook his head in amazement. And she's been sitting quietly in the back of classes for weeks, just trying to blend. In the meanwhile, Vera stood calmly beside the medical examination, showing no signs of exertion despite having just controlled 3 larger opponents. Her breathing remained steady, her posture relaxed, as if the intense physical confrontation had been nothing more than a warm-up exercise. Miss Knight, Superintendent Foster approached with obvious respect. Are you injured in any way? No, ma'am, Vera replied simply. Mr. Crawford's technique was inefficient and telegraphed well in advance. His violation of safety protocols required immediate termination of the demonstration, Detective Fox added. But the educational objectives were clearly achieved. Principal Stone addressed the crowd as medical personnel continued their assessment of Crawford. Ladies and gentlemen, what you have witnessed today represents the effectiveness of proper training and preparation over physical intimidation and aggression. More importantly, Coach Woods added, you've seen demonstration that community safety can be enhanced through education and training rather than fear and avoidance. Nathan Lane emerged from the crowd of observers, his face flushed with anger. At having witnessed his daughter's expectations thoroughly destroyed, he approached Detective Fox with obvious agitation. This entire event was inappropriate and dangerous, Nathan declared loudly enough for surrounding people to hear. A minor should never have been placed in a situation requiring violence against adults. Mr. Lane, Detective Fox replied calmly, your daughter's classmate volunteered to address threatening behavior that your preferred institutional channels had failed to resolve effectively. Those channels take time to work properly, Nathan protested. Time that potential victims don't always have, Caroline Knight interjected, appearing beside Detective Fox with quiet authority. My daughter demonstrated that community members can protect each other when institutions move too slowly. Nathan's political instincts recognized the dangerous ground he was traversing. Criticizing a military family's approach to community protection, especially after their methods had proven spectacularly effective, would not play well with local voters. I'm simply concerned about precedent, Nathan said, moderating his tone. We can't have students taking justice into their own hands. Justice and self-defense are different concepts, Vera said, joining the conversation with her characteristic directness. Today wasn't about justice, it was about education and deterrence. Deterrence? Every potential bully in the county watched this demonstration, Vera explained. They learned that size and aggression don't guarantee success against proper preparation and community support. That lesson will protect future victims more effectively than any number of policy statements. Dr. Wells completed her examination of Crawford, who was now sitting upright, but clearly shaken by the experience. Minor bruising, no serious injuries. He'll be sore for a few days, but there's no permanent damage. Unlike the damage he intended to inflict on my daughter, Caroline observed pointedly. Crawford struggled to his feet with assistance from his friends, his earlier bravado completely extinguished. The young man who had terrorized Luna Pierce and threatened Vera Knight now faced a gymnasium full of people who had witnessed his complete tactical defeat. I want to press charges, Crawford said desperately, grasping for any way to salvage his situation. She assaulted me in front of witnesses. You violated the safety protocols by using excessive force, Detective Fox replied. Firmly, Miss Knight responded with appropriate defensive measures. If anyone has grounds for assault charges, it would be her against you. But I barely touched her. Because she prevented you from touching her, Dr. Wells pointed out. Your intent was clear to everyone present. Crawford looked around the gymnasium, seeking support from any quarter, but found only expressions ranging from disapproval to outright contempt. Even his own friends appeared embarrassed by his behavior and eager to distance themselves from the situation. "This isn't over," Crawford said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, it is," Vera replied quietly. "It's completely over. You tested whether intimidation and aggression could overcome preparation and skill. The answer is documented, witnessed, and undeniable." As the crowd began to disperse, students and parents approached Vera with congratulations and requests for information about self-defense training. What had begun as a response to personal harassment had evolved into community-wide interest in empowerment and protection education. Phoenix waited until most people had left before approaching Vera near the gymnasium exit. His usual social confidence seemed subdued in the aftermath of witnessing her extraordinary demonstration. "That was unlike anything I've ever seen," he said simply. "It was necessary," Vera replied, gathering her equipment bag. "Was it difficult, knowing you could hurt them seriously, but choosing not to?" Vera paused, considering his question carefully. "My father taught me that true strength lies in exercising restraint when you have the power to cause harm. Today wasn't about proving I could hurt them. It was about proving that bullying behavior has consequences. And now everyone knows that you're not someone to be trifled with. More importantly, everyone knows that victims don't have to remain helpless if they're willing to prepare and accept community support," Vera corrected. "That's the lesson that matters." Phoenix nodded slowly, understanding that he was speaking with someone whose perspective had been shaped by experiences far beyond typical teenage concerns. "Would you teach me?" he asked suddenly. "Teach you what?" "How to do what you did today. How to protect people who need protection." Vera studied his earnest expression, recognizing genuine commitment rather than casual curiosity. It requires dedication, discipline, and understanding that physical skills are only part of the equation. "I understand that," Phoenix said. "What happened today wasn't just about fighting techniques. It was about being willing to stand up for what's right, regardless of the personal cost." "That's exactly right," Vera agreed. "When do you want to start?" As they walked together toward the parking lot where their respective families waited, Vera reflected on the day's unexpected developments. What had begun as a threatening text message had transformed into a community education event that would influence local attitudes toward bullying, self-defense, and personal responsibility for months to come. The demonstration had achieved its primary objectives. Crawford's intimidation campaign was definitively ended. Potential future bullies had received unmistakable deterrent education, and community members now understood that proper training could level playing fields that seemed hopelessly unbalanced. But perhaps most importantly, Vera Knight was no longer the invisible transfer student trying to avoid attention. She had become a community resource, a teacher, and a symbol that strength could serve justice rather than dominance. The quiet girl who had arrived in Sunset Hills hoping to blend into the background had instead emerged as a leader whose influence would extend far beyond the gymnasium where she had just changed everything. Tuesday morning arrived with Sunset Hills buzzing like a disturbed hive, the previous day's demonstration having sent ripples throughout the community that extended far beyond the school's boundaries. Local coffee shops, barbershops, and gathering places hummed with discussions about the small teenager who had systematically dismantled 3 larger opponents while maintaining perfect composure. At the corner cafe, retired veterans gathered for their regular morning coffee, found themselves engaged in animated discussions about military training principles and civilian applications. Frank Rodriguez, Carlos Pierce's 70-year-old father and a Korean War veteran, held court at his usual table near the window. "That girl moves like someone who understands real combat," Frank observed, stirring sugar into his black coffee. "Not sport fighting or recreational martial arts. Someone taught her how to neutralize threats efficiently. Her father was Army." "Rangers," added Tom Bradley, the off-duty police officer who had witnessed yesterday's events. "Rangers don't teach their families parlor tricks. They teach survival skills. Different kind of education than most kids receive these days," agreed Bill Harper, a Vietnam veteran whose own grandchildren attended Sunset Hills High. "Most teenagers learn to avoid problems. Military families learn to solve them." Meanwhile, at Sunset Hills High School, Vera's arrival created a phenomenon she had never experienced: respectful attention rather than curious stares. Students stepped aside in hallways not from fear, but from genuine admiration for someone who had stood up to adult bullies and won decisively. "Morning, Vera," called Jessica Kim, a freshman who had previously been too intimidated to speak to upperclassmen. "My mom wanted me to ask if you're really going to start teaching self-defense classes." "We're exploring options," Vera replied, diplomatically, still adjusting to her transformed social status. "That would be amazing," Jessica continued with growing confidence. "There are guys from other schools who hang around the bus stop sometimes, making comments and being creepy. It would be nice to know how to handle situations like that." Vera made mental notes about bus stop harassment patterns, recognizing that yesterday's demonstration had revealed broader community safety issues that deserved attention. Her tactical mind was already considering how to address systemic problems rather than just individual incidents. In first period, Mrs. Park opened her history class with a discussion that acknowledged yesterday's events while maintaining educational focus. Yesterday's demonstration provided practical illustration of asymmetric conflict principles we've been studying. Mrs. Park began, addressing the obvious elephant in the room. "Miss Knight, would you care to share your perspective on how historical military strategies applied to your situation?" Vera considered her response carefully, aware that her classmates were listening with unprecedented attention. "Superior intelligence gathering allowed for adequate preparation time. Understanding the opponent's psychological profile enabled prediction of tactical choices. Most importantly, controlling the engagement environment neutralized their numerical and size advantages." Phoenix Dean, sitting in his usual spot 3 rows away, found himself studying Vera with new appreciation for the analytical mind behind her calm demeanor. "Those are principles that apply beyond physical confrontations," he observed. "Elaborate," Mrs. Park encouraged. "Any situation where you're facing overwhelming opposition can be managed through preparation, intelligence, and environmental control," Phoenix said. "Academic challenges, social pressure, even political conflicts." Ruby Lane, who had remained conspicuously silent since yesterday's humiliation, finally spoke with bitter precision. "Some of us prefer to handle conflicts through civilized discussion rather than primitive violence." The classroom fell silent as students recognized the personal animosity behind Ruby's comment. Vera turned in her seat to face Ruby directly, her expression remaining calm despite the obvious provocation. "Yesterday's demonstration prevented violence rather than causing it," Vera replied evenly. "Mr. Crawford's escalating harassment pattern would have led to actual assault if not addressed decisively. According to you," Ruby shot back. "According to documented behavioral analysis and Detective Fox's professional assessment," Vera corrected. "Predatory escalation follows predictable patterns that require intervention before reaching critical thresholds." Mrs. Park intervened before the exchange could escalate further. "These are complex issues that benefit from multiple perspectives and careful analysis rather than personal arguments." But the tension between Ruby and Vera had become apparent to everyone present, adding another layer of complexity to the social dynamics that were reshaping the school community. During lunch period, Vera found herself at the center of an impromptu gathering that included students from multiple grade levels seeking information about self-defense training. Luna Pierce, Phoenix Dean, Tucker West, and Jade Rivera had been joined by a diverse group of underclassmen who had gained confidence from yesterday's demonstration. "My little sister is only 13, but she's already dealing with older boys who think they can intimidate her," explained Marcus Johnson, a sophomore whose family had moved to Sunset Hills from Cleveland the previous year. "She needs to know that she doesn't have to be afraid." "Fear is a normal response to threatening situations," Vera replied thoughtfully. "The goal isn't to eliminate fear, but to ensure that fear doesn't prevent appropriate action when protection is necessary." Chloe Anderson, Luna's former best friend who had drifted away when Luna's shyness became socially inconvenient, approached the table tentatively. "Luna, could I talk to you privately?" Luna glanced at Vera, who nodded encouragingly. The two girls moved to a quieter corner of the cafeteria, leaving Vera to continue fielding questions from other students. "I wanted to apologize," Chloe said, quietly, her usual confidence replaced by obvious discomfort. "I stopped hanging out with you because I thought being friends with someone so quiet would hurt my social standing." "I know," Luna replied simply. "But watching you yesterday, standing next to Vera while she faced those guys, I realized that real friendship means supporting each other when things get difficult, not just when it's convenient." Luna studied her former friend's earnest expression, recognizing genuine remorse rather than social maneuvering. "It's not that simple, Chloe. You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to the way it was." "I know that too," Chloe said. "I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be the kind of friend you deserve, not the kind I was before." Meanwhile, at the main table, Phoenix was asking Vera about training requirements and commitment levels. For serious self-defense instruction, physical conditioning is secondary to mental preparation, Vera explained. "Most people can learn basic defensive techniques within a few weeks, but developing the situational awareness and decision-making, skills that prevent confrontations, takes months or years." "What kind of decision-making skills?" Jade asked. "Threat assessment, de-escalation strategies, environmental awareness, legal implications of defensive actions," Vera listed. "Yesterday's demonstration worked because we controlled every variable: location, timing, supervision, safety protocols. Real-world situations are less predictable." Tucker leaned forward with obvious interest. "So you're not just teaching people how to fight, you're teaching them how to think about conflict." "Exactly. Fighting is a last resort when all other options have been exhausted or aren't viable." Vera paused as she noticed Principal Stone approaching their table with obvious purpose. "Miss Knight," Principal Stone said formally, "could I speak with you privately?" Vera followed him to his office, where she found Detective Fox, Coach Woods, and Dr. Caroline Knight waiting with serious expressions that suggested significant developments. "Vera," Detective Fox began without preamble, "we've received intelligence about potential retaliation attempts connected to yesterday's demonstration." "What kind of retaliation?" Vera asked, settling into the offered chair. "Dylan Crawford has been in contact with older individuals from outside the county," Detective Fox explained. "Social media monitoring suggests they're planning some form of response to what they consider his public humiliation." Caroline leaned forward with parental concern. "How serious is this threat?" "Serious enough to warrant increased security measures and possibly relocating your family temporarily," Detective Fox replied grimly. "No," Vera said immediately. "Relocating would send the message that bullying tactics ultimately succeed. It would also abandon the community members who are counting on the protection and education programs we're developing." Principal Stone looked surprised. "Miss Knight, your safety is more important than any educational program." "My safety is connected to community safety," Vera corrected. "If I run from this threat, it validates the intimidation tactics that will be used against other potential victims. But if I address it properly, we create deterrent effects that protect everyone." Coach Woods studied her students' determined expression. "What are you proposing?" "Controlled environment, proper preparation, community involvement," Vera said, echoing the successful elements of yesterday's demonstration. "Turn their retaliation attempt into another educational opportunity." "Absolutely not," Caroline said firmly. "Yesterday was risk managed through careful planning and safety oversight. What you're describing sounds like deliberate provocation of more dangerous individuals." "Mom, yesterday proved that preparation and community support can neutralize, apparently, overwhelming threats," Vera replied respectfully. "Running away doesn't eliminate the danger, it just postpones it while allowing it to grow stronger." Detective Fox exchanged glances with the other adults, recognizing the strategic thinking behind Vera's proposal, despite legitimate safety concerns. "What specific measures are you considering?" "Intelligence gathering to understand their capabilities and intentions, preparation of appropriate response protocols, coordination with law enforcement for legal oversight," Vera outlined methodically. "Most importantly, community education about recognizing and reporting threatening behavior patterns." "You're talking about turning our school into a fortress," Principal Stone protested. "I'm talking about turning our community into a place where predatory behavior is immediately identified and addressed through proper channels," Vera clarified. "Yesterday's demonstration created deterrent effects, but deterrence requires consistent enforcement to remain effective." Dr. Caroline Knight watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern, recognizing James Knight's tactical thinking combined with protective instincts that extended beyond personal safety to community welfare. "If we agree to consider this approach," Caroline said carefully, "what guarantees can you provide about risk management and safety protocols?" "The same guarantees that applied yesterday," Detective Fox said thoughtfully. "Controlled environment, professional supervision, proper legal framework, immediate medical response capability. Plus enhanced intelligence gathering and preparation time to understand the specific threats we're facing," Vera added. "Yesterday, we responded to an immediate challenge. This time, we can be proactive rather than reactive." Coach Woods nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it's strategic risk rather than random vulnerability, and the educational benefits could extend beyond our immediate community. Other schools are already calling for information about our safety demonstration program," Principal Stone admitted reluctantly. "Regional interest suggests that Sunset Hills could become a model for community-based conflict resolution. Then we have an opportunity to influence policy and practice beyond our own situation," Vera concluded. "But only if we're willing to continue addressing these challenges directly rather than avoiding them." The room fell quiet as the adults processed the implications of Vera's proposal. Outside the office windows, students moved through hallways, with the increased confidence that came from knowing their community had resources for addressing threatening situations. "All right," Detective Fox said finally, "we'll develop enhanced security protocols and intelligence gathering procedures. But this time, we involve state and federal resources if necessary. The stakes are too high for purely local response." "Agreed," Caroline said, recognizing that her daughter's path was leading toward responsibilities that extended far beyond typical teenage concerns. As the meeting concluded with plans for expanded safety measures and educational programming, Vera understood that she had crossed another threshold in her journey from refugee to leader. The quiet girl who had arrived in Sunset Hills, hoping to disappear, had instead become the center of a community transformation that would influence regional approaches to safety and protection. But with leadership came vulnerability, and tonight would bring new challenges that would test everything she had learned about courage, preparation, and the price of standing up for others in a world where not everyone appreciated the protection she offered. The afternoon bell would release students into a community that was rapidly learning to see strength not as intimidation, but as service to those who needed protection. Tomorrow would bring new tests of that understanding, and Vera Knight would discover whether her influence could extend beyond immediate victories to lasting change in how people thought about power, responsibility, and the obligations that came with capability. 3 weeks later, the transformation of Sunset Hills had become unmistakable to anyone who remembered the community before Vera Knight's arrival. The weekly self-defense classes that had begun as an experimental program now drew participants from 6 surrounding counties, with Coach Woods and Vera co-instructing sessions that emphasized mental preparation alongside physical techniques. The old gymnasium had been converted into a permanent training facility, complete with professional equipment donated by local businesses whose owners had witnessed the educational demonstration. What had started as a response to individual harassment had evolved into a comprehensive community safety initiative that was attracting attention from educational policymakers across Ohio. Detective Angela Fox stood in her office reviewing incident reports that told a remarkable story of behavioral change. Bullying complaints at Sunset Hills High had dropped to virtually zero, while surrounding schools reported decreased harassment, as word spread about the consequences of predatory behavior in the region. The deterrent effect is measurable, she explained to State Attorney General Patricia Wells, who had arrived that morning to assess the program for potential statewide implementation. Not just at Sunset Hills, but throughout the county, students are reporting threatening behavior earlier, and potential perpetrators are reconsidering their choices. What about the enhanced federal coordination you requested? Attorney General Wells asked, reviewing the comprehensive case files that had accumulated around what media outlets were calling the Sunset Hills model. Complete success, Detective Fox replied with satisfaction. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit confirmed that Crawford's associates were planning significant escalation, but our proactive intelligence gathering allowed for arrests before any violence occurred. The federal investigation had uncovered a network of young adults who had been systematizing harassment and assault tactics across multiple states, using social media to coordinate attacks on victims they considered vulnerable. Vera's public demonstration had disrupted their operational assumptions and led to prosecution of 17 individuals involved in what prosecutors were calling organized predatory conspiracy. And Miss Knight's role in the ongoing program? Indispensable. Detective Fox said simply, she's not just an instructor, she's become a community resource for conflict resolution and threat assessment. Universities are already offering her full scholarships for criminal justice and psychology programs. Meanwhile, at the training facility, Vera observed a diverse group of students working through situational awareness exercises under Coach Woods's supervision. Luna Pierce demonstrated evasion techniques to a group of middle school girls, her transformation from frightened victim to confident instructor, representing the program's broader impact. Remember, Luna called to her students, the goal isn't to become a fighter. The goal is to never need to fight because you recognize and avoid dangerous situations before they develop. Phoenix Dean worked with a group of high school boys, focusing on intervention strategies for protecting others rather than personal combat techniques. His genuine commitment to learning had made him one of the program's most effective peer instructors. Real strength means using your advantages to protect people who need help, Phoenix explained to his group. Size and athletic ability should make you a guardian, not a threat. Vera moved between groups, offering technical corrections and strategic guidance, but her primary focus was on psychological preparation and decision-making skills that would serve students far beyond any specific self-defense scenario. Miss Knight, called Brian Walsh, a freshman who had initially been too intimidated to participate, but had gradually gained confidence through the program. What do you do when someone is threatening you, but they haven't actually done anything? Illegal yet? Excellent question, Vera replied, gathering the entire group for a broader discussion. Who wants to share their thoughts on threat escalation patterns? Jessica Kim raised her hand confidently. Document everything. Establish witnesses, communicate clear boundaries, and notify appropriate authorities about the pattern, even if individual incidents seem minor. Perfect analysis, Vera confirmed. Prevention requires recognizing warning signs before they become emergencies. Most serious assaults are preceded by escalating behavioral patterns that could have been interrupted earlier. The door to the facility opened, admitting Ruby Lane with an expression that mixed reluctance with determined resolve. Her presence caused a slight stir among students who remembered her initial hostility toward Vera and the program. Ruby. Vera acknowledged neutrally, not wanting to create uncomfortable dynamics for other participants. I'd like to speak with you privately, Ruby said, her usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious vulnerability. They moved to Coach Wood's office, leaving the classes to continue under peer instruction that had become increasingly effective as students gained experience and confidence. This is difficult for me, Ruby began without preamble, but I need to apologize for my behavior and ask if I can join the program. Vera studied Ruby's expression, looking for signs of manipulation or social maneuvering, but finding only genuine discomfort and what appeared to be authentic regret. What changed your mind? Vera asked directly. Last weekend, some guys from Westfield cornered me at the mall, Ruby replied quietly. They said things about what they'd heard regarding girls from Sunset Hills, and when I tried to leave, they followed me to the parking lot. What happened? Nothing, because Marcus Johnson and his sister were there. They recognized the situation and intervened before anything serious happened. Ruby's voice carried embarrassment at needing rescue from underclassmen she had previously considered beneath her notice. But it made me realize that my father's money and social connections don't actually protect me from real threats. Vera nodded thoughtfully. Fear can be an effective teacher when it leads to better preparation rather than paralysis. I've been thinking about what you said during the demonstration, Ruby continued, about community responsibility and protecting people who need help. I was wrong to oppose the program because I was worried about my social status. Social status is less important than personal safety and community welfare, Vera agreed. But changing perspectives requires more than just admitting previous mistakes. I know, Ruby said earnestly. I want to learn, not just for myself, but because I realized that I've been part of the problem. I used social intimidation to control other students, which isn't that different from physical intimidation. Vera was quiet for several moments, recognizing the courage it had taken for Ruby to acknowledge her own bullying behavior and request help in changing it. The program isn't just about physical self-defense, Vera said finally. It's about understanding how power should be used responsibly. Are you prepared to examine how you've used your social advantages to hurt other people? Yes, Ruby replied, without hesitation. I want to be someone who protects others instead of someone who needs protection. Then you can start with the next session, Vera decided. But I want your commitment that you'll apply these principles to all aspects of your behavior, not just physical confrontations. You have it, Ruby said with obvious relief. As they returned to the main training area, Vera reflected on the unexpected nature of personal transformation. Ruby's request represented the kind of comprehensive change that made the program's broader impact possible, former antagonists becoming allies in community protection efforts. The afternoon session concluded with a community meeting that had become a weekly tradition where participants shared experiences and discussed real-world applications of their training. Parents, students, and community leaders gathered to address ongoing safety concerns and coordinate response strategies. Principal Stone addressed the group with the confidence that had developed through successful program management. I'm pleased to announce that the State Department of Education has approved Sunset Hills as a pilot site for comprehensive conflict resolution education. We'll be training instructors from 20 other districts over the summer. More importantly, Detective Fox added, we've received federal grants to expand the program's community outreach and threat assessment capabilities. This model is being studied for implementation in communities nationwide. Caroline Knight watched her daughter address questions from community members with professional competence that would have impressed military officers twice her age. The quiet girl who had arrived in Sunset Hills seeking invisibility had become a community leader whose influence extended far beyond their small Ohio town. Miss Knight, asked Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman whose witness testimony had supported Vera during the original incident, what advice do you have for other communities that want to implement similar programs? Start with education and community involvement, Vera replied thoughtfully. Physical techniques are less important than developing awareness, communication skills, and coordinated response capabilities. Most conflicts can be prevented or de-escalated if community members understand their role in maintaining safety and if prevention fails, asked Frank Rodriguez, the Korean War veteran who had become one of the program's strongest community supporters. Then you respond with appropriate force, guided by proper training and legal oversight, Vera said. But the goal is always to stop threatening behavior with minimum necessary intervention, not to punish or seek revenge. Phoenix raised his hand from the student section. How do we balance individual protection with community responsibility? Individual safety and community safety are connected, Vera explained. When you develop skills to protect yourself, you also develop capacity to protect others. When you learn to recognize threatening behavior patterns, you can warn potential victims before they become actual victims. The meeting continued for another hour as community members discussed implementation details and shared success stories. Students reported increased confidence in handling social pressure. Parents described improved family communication about safety issues, and local business owners noted decreased vandalism and harassment in commercial areas. As the session concluded and people began departing, Nathan Lane approached Vera with the careful respect that had replaced his earlier antagonism. His attempted political intimidation had backfired spectacularly as community support for the program grew, forcing him to align with popular opinion rather than oppose it. Miss Knight, Nathan said formally, I want to acknowledge that your approach to community safety has been more effective than traditional methods. The school board unanimously supports expanding the program. Thank you, Mr. Lane, Vera replied diplomatically, understanding the political considerations behind his public support. I also want to thank you for accepting Ruby into the program despite our previous disagreements, Nathan continued. She's shown more personal growth in 3 weeks than in the previous 3 years. People change when they have opportunities. To grow and support to succeed, Vera said simply. Your daughter has both now. As the training facility emptied, Vera remained behind to secure equipment and prepare for the next day's sessions. Luna and Phoenix stayed to help, their friendship having deepened through shared commitment to the program's success. "Hard to believe it's only been 2 months since you arrived," Luna observed as they stacked protective mats in storage areas. "Feels like a lifetime," Phoenix agreed. "Everything about this place has changed. Everything about all of us has changed," Vera corrected gently. The community was ready for this transformation. It just needed someone to demonstrate that change was possible. "You've done more than demonstrate change," Luna said. "You've created a model that other communities can follow. That's going to help thousands of people we'll never meet." Vera considered this perspective as they finished their cleanup tasks. Her father had taught her that individual actions could have consequences far beyond immediate circumstances, but she was still adjusting to the reality of influencing policy and practice across multiple states. "What's next?" Phoenix asked as they prepared to leave. "College applications, continuing program development, training new instructors," Vera replied practically. "But also normal teenage things like prom, graduation, figuring out what I want to study." "Normal teenage things," Luna laughed. "Because teaching federal law enforcement agencies about community conflict resolution is totally normal." "It is for me," Vera said with a smile. "My normal just happens to include responsibilities that most people don't face." They walked together toward the parking lot where their families waited, passing the memorial garden that the community had dedicated to Colonel James Knight and other military families who had contributed to local safety and protection efforts. "He would be proud," Phoenix said quietly, noting Vera's pause at her father's memorial stone. "He would be satisfied," Vera corrected. "Pride comes from personal achievement. Satisfaction comes from service that continues beyond your individual contribution." As they reached their respective vehicles, Vera reflected on the journey that had brought her from traumatized military dependent to community leader. The path had been neither planned nor entirely chosen, but it had led to opportunities to honor her father's memory while building something positive for future generations. 6 months later, the Sunset Hills model had been implemented in 47 communities across 12 states, with documented reductions in bullying, harassment, and adolescent violence wherever proper training and community involvement supported the program. Universities competed to recruit Vera Knight for their criminal justice and public policy programs, recognizing her unique combination of practical experience and theoretical understanding. But perhaps most importantly, a generation of young people had learned that strength could serve protection rather than domination, that community safety was everyone's responsibility, and that individual courage could inspire systemic change when properly directed and supported. The quiet girl, who had once hoped to remain invisible, had become a symbol of how military family values could adapt to civilian challenges, creating lasting improvements in community safety and interpersonal respect. Dylan Crawford's threatening text message had intended to intimidate a vulnerable victim, but instead had catalyzed a transformation that would influence educational policy and community protection strategies for decades to come. In small town, Ohio, where autumn leaves still drifted across school grounds and families still gathered for Friday night football games, children now grew up understanding that they had both the right to protection and the responsibility to protect others. That lesson, taught by a 16-year-old girl who refused to let bullies define community standards, had become her father's most enduring legacy and her own greatest achievement. The demonstration was over, but the education continued, rippling outward through communities that were learning to see strength not as intimidation, but as service to those who needed safety in an uncertain world. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch. And don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.